order at 7 o'clock. We would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. As was stated on the board agenda, this meeting is open to the public in accordance with Phase 4 guidance issued by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois State Board of Education. Individuals are required to wear a face covering at all times while in the building and during the board meeting. The capacity in any room is limited to 50 and seats will be spaced a minimum of 6 feet apart. If you choose to go outside, you may remove your mask, but please remain 6 feet from others. That would be outside. Attendees are expected to follow these guidelines or will be asked to leave the building. We appreciate everyone's understanding and willingness to abide by these expectations for our collective safety and health. Thank you. So now we'll rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Here.
Mrs. Witt. Here.
With 6 members, sorry.
Mrs. Pavlik is absent.
Thank you very much. With 6 members present, we do have a quorum. Would anyone like to move something from consent to new business? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to board and superintendent salutes.
Yes, Mrs. Huber, would you please come up to the microphone? In a second, well, actually right now, we'd like to take a second to recognize Mrs. Shelly Huber, who's been a faithful servant to Kaneland School District for 26 years. She's currently serving as our principal at John Shields, and she's been there for almost 20 years as the principal, and at the end of this year, she's going to be retiring. And so I know we'll do our regular recognition for our retirees at the end of the year in May. But in this instance, I wanted to do a special recognition for Mrs. Huber, and she also wanted to take a second to address the board and the community and a chance to say thank you. So with that, Mrs. Huber.
Thank you. My name is Shelly Huber, and I'm the current principal at Kaneland John Shields Elementary. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the board and the Kaneland community for affording me the chance to serve as a PE teacher and administrator in Kaneland schools. I've had the pleasure of having Adam and Blaine Rivas, as well as Elliot, Ethan, and Erica Witt in the building. Just missed Ethan Junk. And even though Gail isn't here, I did have her granddaughter at Kaneland John Shields as well. My first day in charge of Kaneland John Shields was a result of the current principal, or the principal at that time, Maureen Frawley, had to be hospitalized. So Dr. McCormick, who was the superintendent at the time, asked me if I could get a sub for PE and cover the building. That day was 9/11. I survived that day, and I told myself, if I can do that, I can do this job. I've certainly had my successes and have suffered some failures, but for the most part, it's been a wonderful 25 years at Kaneland 302. I started my admin career with 9/11, and I'm leaving in a global pandemic. You really can't get more exciting than that. Before I finish, I'd like to thank 2 very important people who have impacted my career at Kaneland. Sharon Wenz for showing me how to lead, and Dr. Sarah Mum for believing that I could and mentoring me in becoming an instructional leader. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. You were this close. You said you hoped you could make it without crying at all. You were that close. You did a great job. Thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for your years of dedication and service to Kaneland, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was all we
Any
had for
other
salutes
salutes?
tonight.
Okay. So next we'll move on to public comment. So I'll read our public comment rules. The board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you choose to speak publicly, we ask that you do so at the microphone, state your name and the village of residence or your association with us for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. And just so you know, there's a public comment at the beginning of the meeting where that's the structure, and at the end of the meeting as well. You are encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning the individual students or staff members. While public education can be an emotional issue, and understandably so, the board strives to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Those who speak are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. So the floor is open to public comment. So again, we're going to limit comment to 3 minutes a person, so anyone who wishes to speak will have that opportunity, hopefully. If you're speaking for a group and people want to raise their hands to just kind of show that you agree with that person instead of individually speaking, that is fine as well. So we want to give people an opportunity to speak, but we are limited to time today. So we will go in the order that people signed up. First, Kim Harner, so you can come to the microphone, and then after her will be Tonya Grossinger, and I will call you next.
Good evening. My name is Kim Harner, and I'm here tonight with my husband, who's now in the overflow room because he was late, and we are Sugar Grove residents. Tonya and I, Tonya right here, created a petition that was sent to President Sparber on February 15th, asking for action from
I'm sorry, ma'am, you need to put your mask on.
I'm actually not able to, but thank you.
And then I'm sorry, you'll have to step out. We can read your public comment if you would like. Sorry about that.
Okay. We both realized
wear
that
your-
Kaneland
thank you.
parents, a lot of them, were reaching out to the administration and asking questions like, when can kids go back into school full-time in person? How can I help my child with IEP concerns? Why can other local schools go back in person full-time and we can't? When can we go back? Just to name a few. And parents didn't feel like they were getting actual answers that made sense. The answers were more or less excuses, and the administration has not been transparent. The petition was very clear in what parents wanted and why. Children are being negatively impacted academically, emotionally, and mentally by their isolation and their lack of education in the AB model. You will hear parents talk about their experiences tonight. There is no plan in place for a full-time in-person return to school for the Kaneland School District during Phase 4. This has been confirmed by the school district administration. There is no dedicated administration committee for the problem-solving necessary to find solutions to return our kids to school in person full-time. We ask for a full-time return to in-person school option with an effective date of April 5th. We ask for a committee to be developed to problem-solve how to get to the goal of April 5th. This is how other districts have been successful. To date, nearly 1,000 parents signed the petition, and that's been in the past week. So while you might find it easy to send us copy and paste emails and not provide transparency, we do expect to get answers to the questions we have. Why can't our kids return to school full-time as an option effective April 5th? Just as a reminder, that is an entire 6 weeks from today. Are you waiting for Illinois to move to Phase 5 before you offer a full-time in-person option? As a reminder, Phase 5 in Illinois means all clear, life back to normal. Why don't you call out the negative impact of mental health for our kids in the materials tonight? Why do your materials tonight only have 2 slides on the topic of returning to school full-time, even in August, with 0 details of the obstacles the district faces? Are you waiting for the rules set by the governor to change? The CDC says kids should be back in school full-time. Teachers can return to school full-time without being vaccinated. Once vaccinated, in the case of close contact, you don't have to quarantine for 3 months. This 3 month of no quarantine provision syncs up well for Kaneland teachers who will have their 2nd dose by mid-March. Not all school districts are the same, but let's take Yorkville, for example. They have successfully had full-time in-person since September. They're a large school district, they're 15 minutes down the road. And their COVID statistics as of last week are worse than Kaneland. For example, case rate per 100,000 individuals, Kendall County 153, Kane County 110. Positivity rate 6.7, Kane County 4.6. I hope the administration listens tonight to what parents have to say. I really do. We need those with the responsibility to problem solve how to get our kids back full-time to do so. So please listen to the parents, those here, and the nearly 1,000 that signed the petition. And to the parents who have felt like they haven't had a voice, you do now. We are 1,000 strong, and we are Kaneland Go Forward, Parents United. Thank you.
So, Tonya Grossinger, please, and then Jennifer will be next. I'm not sure your last name.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Tonya Grossinger, and I live in Maple Park. Over the last few weeks, I've been trying to understand why plans aren't in place for next school year. It seems that every other district within our area has found a way to make plans work for this school year, but we can't seem to get anything put together for next school year. I pulled my oldest child from Kaneland School District 2 weeks before school started last year to get him 5 days in person at a private school for kindergarten, knowing, or hoping I should say, that by the following school year, he would be right back at the public schools where he belongs. I pay taxes. My husband works 3 jobs just to have enough for us to provide for our children. And we're literally scraping by so I could give him an education that unfortunately Kaneland couldn't provide for him last year, or this past year. And now I find out that that education may not even be provided for him next year. And that's devastating, because now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. You know, we have full-day kindergarteners paying the full price for the entire month, $250 a month, and they're lucky if they're in school 2 days a week right now. Our kids, and I say ours for all of us, even though mine is at a private school, our kids are getting 0 teacher interaction on home days. 0. Other districts, when they're at home on their home days, are zooming in to their classrooms. It's not ideal. It's far too much screen time for any child, but they're making it work. Teachers can move on with curriculum all year long because they're seeing kids every day. Our kids are getting 2 days a week right now, maybe 3, depending on what Wednesday it is. And then they get a packet. We have high schoolers done with school on their home days before 9:30 in the morning. I would have loved that in high school, but I was there every day. And it just doesn't seem like anybody knows how the phases work. We were told to go to phase 4 by our governor on February 3rd. The agenda came out for the last meeting on February 4th, yet the February 8th meeting was still Zoom. Now we're told that we need to wait for phase 5 to get back to school, and that's completely normal. With our governor in this state, and this isn't to bash anything specifically, but we've gone back and forth this entire time. We went from a 2-week flatten the curve to 11 months now. And now we're waiting for the governor to say, yes, you're in phase 5. Well, what happens when he says, okay, back to phase 4 next fall? Do we just pull our kids back into this mess of hybrid that we're in? Why can't there be some creativity? 3 feet apart instead of 6 feet apart. Schools are doing that around this state. They have to follow IDPH, and they're still doing that.
Thank you. You've reached your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks.
So Jennifer, is that? Thank you. And then the next will be Laura Wilson. Jennifer, if you could state your last name. Thank you. Pardon me?
I'm Jennifer Hogan, Sugar
you.
Grove resident. I'm here today to express why our children should go back to school full-time in person for the remainder of the school year, and no questions asked, no more surveys, go back to school full-time in person school calendar year 2021-2022. I'm also going to address an email I received from Dr. Mumm, Director of Education Services K-5, and the reason she gave me as to why our children should not go back to school full-time in person for the remainder of the school calendar year. As I hope you all know, we're in phase 4. Phase 4, if you go to the illinois.gov website, it says what this phase looks like, and I quote, "Additional measures can be carefully lifted, allowing for schools and child care programs to reopen with social distancing policies in place," unquote. You read further down what's open, and I quote, "Education and child care, P through 12 schools, higher education, all summer programs, and child care open with IDPH approved safety guidance," unquote. What's IDPH approved safety guidance? We're already doing that. Wearing a mask, social distancing, washing your hands, covering your coughs and sneezes, avoiding touching your face, cleaning, disinfecting, staying home when sick, limiting use of shared objects. We are in phase 4. Phase 4, reopen schools. With that being said, Yorkville's back full-time in person. St. Charles has been back since January, K through 5, full-time in person. All the first graders in Batavia are back full-time in person since January. All these private schools have been back since last year. The Lutheran school in Batavia has 18 to 22 kids in a classroom. The Harvest Bible School in Elgin has 18 to 24 kids in the classroom. I know this firsthand by family members that either work there or have friends that work there or kids that go there. And you know what? They're managing COVID, and they're managing it safely with limited cases. So with that being said, I want to address my concerns to the principal of John Shields. And Mrs. Huber, I know she's no longer here, but she was great. She responded right away. I explained to her, why has Kaneland School District not gone to school when all these other surrounding school districts are? Along with the many struggles myself and many of us full-time working parents are having with this hybrid schedule. Our children are not getting the education they should be getting and they deserve to get. They are falling behind on this hybrid schedule, and take-home packets are not the answer. In return, I did receive a response from Dr. Mum. I appreciate her promptness. Dr. Mum is the Director of Education Services, K through 5. I received a response on February 6th, and at this time I'm going to share those bullet points with you she made as to why our kids are not going back to school. Her first bullet point, and I quote, "Some other districts have pulled all library media teachers, RTI teachers, and instructional support coaches to be classroom teachers. When you do this, you pull all support and intervention service from other students. This also would mean that students who've had a teacher for 2/3 of the school year would be assigned a brand new teacher that may have never taught that content. At this time, we do not think that it is best practice for student learning for the last third of the school year," end quote. Well, with that being said, I think I stand before you voicing my opinion and rebuttal to that comment, along with all these other parents in here, that a brand new teacher in a structured environment who has a degree in education is much better qualified individual for the overall education of not only my daughter, but everyone's kids in this room tonight. I do not have a degree in education, and I don't know how many of you have a degree in education that are in here today. I will assume the majority of the parents do not. Therefore, our children would benefit with a higher level of education from a brand new teacher in a structured environment who has a degree in education than from myself, my husband, a brother, a sister, an aunt, uncle, grandparents, or whoever we could find that's available that day, because we're full-time working parents.
Thank you for
to
your
watch and
comments.
teach our kids. I would like to do 2 more bullet points. I think it's important to hear this. I would like to read the points that Dr. Mum, I would like to read the 2 more bullet points that Dr. Mum
Very
expressed.
quickly, because you're going to take someone else's time, so I can't.
Can I read these 2 bullet points? I think it's important for you parents to hear the
It's
2
not
bullet
really
points.
up to the vote.
That's not a, no.
Her second bullet point.
Okay, sorry, your time is up. Can I
Her
have the next
second
speaker,
bullet
please?
point is another district brings students in for 5 days, but they send them home by lunch at 12:30. This would mean that families need to find daily daycare options for younger students. You know what? We already are finding daily daycare
Please,
options
I need to
for
have the next
students.
person come up to
We're
comment,
already doing
please.
that on a hybrid schedule. We're already doing
Thank you.
on a hybrid schedule.
I'm Laura Wilson, I'm the next speaker, so I'll let you
Thank
finish if
you.
want.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
No, are you sure?
You can take
Okay.
my time, it's okay.
Thank you.
We're already doing that on a hybrid schedule. Many of us are already struggling, trying to find somebody to watch our kids and to teach them. Her third point is Other school districts have also converted larger spaces into classroom space to allow social distancing for larger classes. The impact from this decision is that other students need to take physical education in classrooms and not gym spaces, and it also means there's no library access for students. I am thoroughly confused there, because what are our kids doing in the library so often and so much that that's the end of the world for them to go back to school if they can't have access to the library? And I don't know if you guys realize, but our kids haven't had gym in the gym class for the past year on and off. They've had it in a dining room, a living room, a kitchen, a bedroom, or not at all. I don't think you guys are understanding that these reasons are absolutely absurd. Our children would benefit going back to school with an educational teacher that has a degree in education full-time in a structured environment. It disheartens me, and quite frankly, it confuses me as to why the Director of Education, from my interpretation, is stopping our children from getting an education and allowing them to fall behind. Instead of being proactive and finding solutions to go back full-time in person, I'm hearing all the no's for getting an education. Everything I'm hearing is completely counterintuitive to a solid education these children should be getting. Just like the medical field, which I'm sure Laura can speak with you about, our teachers are essential employees to our children, and they need to step up to this battlefield and teach. The unions need to step up and let these teachers tell them they need to teach. Nurses and doctors didn't run away when COVID hit. It saddens me that they are running away from this when they signed up to be the role model for our children. Knowing that over 400 teachers and staff got their first vaccination over a week ago, I encourage you to think twice about the reasons you are saying no and start being proactive and finding solutions for our children to return back to school full-time in person for the remainder of the school year. Not having gym in an actual gym class, not being able to go to the library, those are not reasons why our children should not be back to school full-time in person. They need to go back full-time in person, especially knowing that these teachers got their second round of vaccinations coming up. There is no reason why these kids should not be back. Our children need to have normalcy, they need consistency, and they need to mentally feel good again. Let them finish the school year off full-time in person. This hybrid plan is academically setting our children back, and that falls on you. Kaneland School Board, you need to change it, and it's time. Thank you.
So perfect segue, and basically mine's going to be fairly quick because everybody's pretty much said everything I want to say, but I want to take a moment and say, look at all of our parents here and all of those that you can't see in the other room. And I don't honestly know what the overflow room looks like right now, but I know that I saw car after car pulling in here for all the parents that care about our children and their education. Now is the time. We're speaking up. The vaccine's here. We've had a chance to get it. If they chose not to, that's fine too. I'm a nurse. I worked in a critical care throughout this entire time. I, of all people, have seen the worst of the worst. I've held a hand as somebody has died. I understand what we're dealing with, and I know that everybody else does too. But that does not mean that our children do not need education. They need structure. They need guidance. They need somebody better than me, a nurse, teaching them what they need to learn. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a teacher, and I'll never claim to be, and I'm very thankful for our teachers, and I'm sure everybody can agree with that as well. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here fighting, because we need them. We need them more than ever, but we also need to have the ability for our children to be there with them. When my child, I have a first grader and a kindergartner. When they can finish their homework in 30 minutes to maybe an hour, if I have to fight them because I'm not a teacher, I'm mom, that's not education. They deserve better. They deserve much better.
Thank you.
I'm one of those that pays the $250 a month also, so I will speak for the aspect of when you're paying the $250 for extended day kindergarten, which I was told was for curriculum. What curriculum when they can finish it in 30 minutes?
Karen Weber.
Hi, Karen Weber with Sugar Grove. I have 2 kids in school right now. One graduated a few years ago. I had no intention of talking tonight, but I'm feeling like just some parenthood over here, looking at you guys and feeling like you just don't get it, like you don't care, like you're not embracing what we're saying to you. And it's more to me about education. It's also mental health. My sophomore is in therapy now because she just doesn't know what to do, doesn't understand what's going on. I have no answers for her, and it's not right. It just breaks my heart what we're doing to these kids. And I'm so aggravated with you guys for not taking steps to at least get us somewhere, feeling like we're getting closer. You know, I am sitting here thinking, God, you know, March 6th or whatever it was last year, the kids came home, they're like, Mom, they're gonna shut down the school. I'm like, they are not gonna shut down the school. There's no way they're gonna shut down the school. A year later, we are not in school. We are not in the school that they should be. I got a call today from the nurse that my children were on a bus with a kid that tested positive. Can't tell me the bus. My kids take 2 different buses because their dad lives in Elburn, I live in Sugar Grove. What bus were they on? Don't know. Where was the kid sitting? Don't know. Well, according to the guidelines, they need to be 6 feet with the kid on the bus, but now my kids have to stay home for another 2 weeks. My son can't play basketball. For what? If we're following the science and we're following the guidelines, they should be in school. They should not be quarantined, but I have no options. And it's so unhealthy. My kids are just dying inside. So that's all.
Thank you. Mr. Tracy? Mr. Tracy, thank you.
Hello, Brad Tracy, 138 Oxford Avenue, Sugar Grove, Illinois. My son is a 5th grader at John Shields Elementary School. I just want to say that I can understand not knowing what to do a year ago. No one did. I don't have a prepared speech, I'm sorry, but I can. I can understand a year ago. I can understand 6 months after that, but I can't understand this now. I can't tell you what the future is going to be like. The media sometimes tells us that the vaccine is going to save the day. On the other hand, you hear media that we'll be wearing masks till 22 or whatever. I don't know what the future is, but what I do know right now is we need school to start back full time again. The onus is on you to make that happen. You didn't put COVID here. No one did. I don't know where it came from. It's not our fault, but here we are living at it, and the time is now. The time is now to make active solutions for the problems that we're having. I get up in the morning, my son's at school, I say, Colton, what are you doing today? I don't know. Well, let's go check. It's 8 o'clock. There's nothing posted for him to do. We wait till 9 o'clock. It doesn't post until 9:30. We get a posting for him to do, and he starts on his project. I help him, then he comes to me, and I said, Colton, I'm going to let you work on this. I pointed you in the right direction. He comes to me then, and he says, Dad, I need some note cards. Okay, I'll see if I have some note cards happening to lay around. I mean, it's not necessarily a common item, but I probably have them. Need some paper clips. And he proceeds to download a video from YouTube on how to build a bridge out of note cards. There's no instruction in the activity. There's no instruction about what he's learning from that. It's just busy work, man. The time is now to make a change, and the time is now to respond to the situation that we're in for the betterment of our kids and our community. Kaneland Harner Middle School students are working to graduate college, career, and community ready. My son will be here next year, and right now, Kaneland Harner Middle School is not educating my child to be college, career, or community ready. The time is now. Let's make the right decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Heidi Peterson.
Good evening. My name is Heidi Peterson, 311 West Ashton Drive, Maple Park. I am here tonight as a parent in the district and an educator in a neighboring district, District 301, Burlington School District. In August, and I think others would agree, we were happy to get 2 days a week. After all, many districts were saying fully remote. We were proud of Kaneland to come back to school. However, after months of trying the hybrid model, I can tell you, for elementary at least, it's not working. Kids need consistency and a schedule from Monday through Friday that is led by a teacher. Our kids deserve to be taught by a classroom teacher 5 days a week, not parents, grandparents, or babysitters. A classroom teacher should be providing and teaching our students 5 days a week to give them that consistency. As I stated earlier, I teach in District 301, Burlington, a neighboring district very similar to ours. And they have managed to bring K through 5 back 5 days a week. Kids are receiving instruction from their teacher Monday through Friday, and they follow the same schedule, and teachers and elementary students are being held accountable. I teach 6th and 7th grade, and while they are hybrid, teachers are providing instruction to students online and in class at the same time. Students are required to be logged in and take attendance each hour and stay logged in for the entire class period. This holds student and staff accountable so kids aren't looking for note cards and they're not building off of a YouTube video. I'd be happy to share with any board member what we're doing in 301. While it's not perfect, it's much better than what my kids get currently in 302. But I feel strongly moving forward that kids need to be in the classroom 5 days a week. Many other districts have managed to find a way, and it's time for Kaneland to find a way too. It's time to allow students who prefer 5 days a week the option. Just like kids who need to be remote, they should get that option as well. But we got to get our kids back in school. I feel it is time for Kaneland to start looking at other districts to fully implement a 5-day-a-week plan. Some of those districts, if you don't know, include St. Charles 303, Kirkland Hiawatha, Oregon, Byron, District 301, and many private schools, just to name a few. It wouldn't be hard to reach out to some of those superintendents and to some of those board members and find out how they did it. As restaurants, churches, movie theaters, and many other venues are opening in this phase, so should schools. Again, any admin or board member that would like information on District 301's plans, I'd encourage you to reach out, and I'd be happy to share those successes that I have seen firsthand. Thank you for your time, and as many point of views will lead to the best outcome for our children. So I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Amy Corbett. Amy Corbett.
Good evening. My name is Amy Corbett, and I live in Elburn, and I have 2 kids that attend Blackberry Creek Elementary School. And I first would like to agree, someone else had just shared. This was tough when it first happened. None of us knew what was going to happen. None of us knew it was going to take longer than 2 weeks and longer than now almost a year. I also just want to acknowledge that teachers, parents, everybody are doing things above and beyond in a lot of ways than what they would have done last year. I sent an email the other day. I was just kind of torqued up about getting the message that the Wednesday schedule was changing. Again, working parents, you just need to be able to have some consistency. There are a lot of people that did not have to have care during the week when their kids were in school, so it's an added expense. But now that they're going once every 4 weeks on a Wednesday, unfortunately, I'm just going to say is ridiculous. Before we ever had this pandemic, a teacher never needed a day during the week fully out of class to be able to prepare their lesson plan, and now you're giving them 2 times a month. So, you know, I know there's Teacher Institute days. I know that there's a lot that they do. I'm not trying to discount that in any way, but it's ridiculous right now with the limited amount of time that the kids are going that you need additional planning. They're sending out packets, they're printing stuff, they're putting it on Canvas. That's not a lot. And as everybody has said, my son can get his work done in about an hour and a half. The worst part of it is the writing assignments where he'll throw a fit. And I said, well, what would you do if you were in Miss Kenyon's class? Well, I wouldn't do that. I would be in the principal's office. I'm your principal right now. The other thing that I said in my message was my daughter is in pre-K at Blackberry Creek. And I know several people here that have their children in the same program. I asked Mrs. McCoy on Saturday when I registered her for kindergarten. I said, how many kids are in Anne Marie's class? 13. I go, well, you got 2 sessions a day, and I'm not going at her like it's her fault. I said, you've got the germiest kids in a class with 13. My son had 9 in his class. And they're going 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. You got an hour, if you're lucky, between both sessions to clean that room. So she acknowledged that that is where there's most risk. But you know what? My daughter goes to school 4 days a week, consistently, no A-B crap. And she's learning. And she's got something consistent that I can depend on too. I also want to understand you've got the building, and I don't want to be ignorant, you've got the old middle school. How can that not be leveraged if you truly need to have more social distancing in a classroom? You've got a building, I know it's a career center there. I know we've used it for Cub Scouts, but if you could help answer that question. I know it will require more teachers, I'm sure, but can you put John Stewart, John Shields, Blackberry Creek students there? I'll reiterate what everyone else has said. St. Charles goes to school, they're a much bigger district. Yeah, they've got more buildings. My son's class is in pretty much a closet with no window. I was horrified when I went in there. So I know part of it is because 2nd grade, every year they've had to have more teachers in his class because their class is so big. If you send people back to school full-time, there will be parents that want to stay home. Give them that right to continue to do that. You did it over the summer, let them keep doing it. Had to take my son to the doctor several times because he's had headaches. Last thing I'll just say is I could go to the grocery store. When this all happened, I bought all my stuff online. I'm comfortable going to a grocery store today. I have to go back to work in a building. My husband's been going back to work at a hospital in IT because they need him there. I could go shopping, and if I truly wanted to, I could go out to dinner. Why can my kid not go to school?
Thank you. All right, we've reached our limit for public comment for this first session. We will have another session. I know there's 2 more people signed up. We'll have a session in the second half of the meeting. So we will move on to the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of the following action items: approval of accounts payable and payroll for February 2021, approval of minutes of the February 8th, 2021 regular meeting, approval of resignations, terminations, and employment of staff, approval of Board of Education meeting date change from Monday, April 26, 2021 to Wednesday, April 28, 2021 for purposes of reorganization, approval of life safety survey and projects, and the following informational items: the Freedom of Information Act report and the professional development update. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Dr. Waller?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Barber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt? Aye. Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to J1, public hearing and approval of driver education fees.
Yes, thank you. I know there's a public hearing that needs to be opened and conducted, so I'll just turn it right back to you, and you can walk us through that, President Sparber.
Sounds good. So we're currently going to have a public hearing on the driver's education fee. So I'm going to open up the public hearing at 7:38. So we will first have Dr. Fuchs give an overview. Thank you.
Thank you, President Sparber. For driver's education each year, the board is required to have a public hearing prior to setting the fee at $250. We've always had the fee at $250. In your board report, I put the revenues and expenditures for last school year for driver's education. Last year, we collected $65,719.70. That includes both the local fees and the state reimbursement. Our expenditures last year were $265,220.56. That means that we spent $199,500.86 more than what we took in. And if you divide that by the number of people in driver's ed, the net amount cost per student was $859.92. With that being said, I recommend that the board continue to maintain the driver's education fee at $250 per student. Any student that qualifies for free and reduced lunch would have that fee waived.
Thank you. So now we have another opportunity for public comment, but it's only on the driver's education hearing that we are having now. So I will open up the floor to public comment for the driver's education fee. I don't believe anyone signed up to make public comment about driver's ed, unless I missed someone. Okay, so then we'll close the public comment on driver's education. Board, do you have any questions?
I just have a quick question. Sorry.
I'm sorry, we can't take questions during the meeting.
No, I just wasn't presented a sheet to sign up
Oh,
for public comment.
you can check in and, outside. Sure. Anything else with driver's ed? No? All right, so I will entertain a motion that the Board of Education approved the attached resolution to maintain the 2021-22 driver's education fee for Kaneland High School at $250 per dollars as presented.
So moved.
All right, we got Mrs. Witt, and a roll call.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas. Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt. Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to J2, presentation of COVID impact on learning.
Yes, before Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh come up to the microphone and walk us through the presentation, I wanted to share a few comments on the academic learning and the goals for this school year. Just wanted to recall that as we planned last spring and summer, our primary goal was to get our students in front of our teachers. At that point, we didn't know if it was going to be, a hybrid model, and for how long, or what hybrid models could look like, because if you recall, there were a series of variations that districts can look at and choose from, and wanted to just remind the board and thank the board for their work that they did back in the summer to approve our plans for additional expenditures and the planning at a couple different board meetings that we brought forward. Also, just a reminder and thanks for the teamwork with our associations. We do have 2 employee groups that we work with that we've met and talked with as we created the plan to come back to school, and also as we agreed on a memorandum of understanding with guidelines to help for the health and safety protocols for the year, as well as to address academic issues. And then also that we still do continue to meet with our teaching staff regularly to provide updates on how we're doing and the metrics that we have followed, the health and safety protocol and metrics. And also do want to share that as Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh go through the presentation, you will see representative test scores from students. You'll see grades. You'll see some academic progress. We will see some areas that we need to address. This is by no means a slight or putting a blame on a teacher, on a grade level or a building or an administrator. It's truly to take a pulse of where our students are right now, halfway through the second semester, almost halfway through the second semester, and 2 full trimesters into the EC5. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh. They'll provide some updates, and then at the end, I'll have some other additional closing comments.
1 second. Colin, can you do the TVs too? Thank you.
Does this do both of them, Colin? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Layden.
Is it on? Is that
Yes,
slide
it
on?
is.
Okay.
Thank you.
As Dr. Layden said, this is a presentation that's specifically focused on the academic progress of our students thus far. We've looked at data sources that we have, as well as trimester and semester and quarter report cards, to figure out that comparison of both hybrid to full remote, and then also to national norms, other school districts across the nation taking the same assessment, and historical norms outside of COVID. How did school districts do across the nation taking a similar test? So you'll see all the data sources we have at this point in time. By no means, as Dr. Layden said, is this everything that we can possibly have for the whole school year. We are taking time at the end of second trimester, which just ended, our third one just began today, to continue to look at the report card indicators, other assessments that come through as we get into our testing period later in the spring, and we'll have those data points as well. A little bit of summary, which I think all of us in the room know. We have 85% of our students that have selected hybrid courses, and about 15% on average that have selected remote. We've been in school in a hybrid face-to-face model all but 15 days that happened between Thanksgiving and holiday break during the adaptive pause due to a spike in COVID. We have put some restrictions on grading and instructional offerings for the different learning structures based on the needs of the students and based on the needs of the teachers. What this report doesn't cover is the SEL component because it was asked to be an academic data report at this time. Patrick and I definitely do monitor the SEL. We look at our behavioral referrals. We talk often with our social workers, our guidance counselors, as well as our administrative team, and have those anecdotal data points for our SEL supports of our student and needs of our students. So a couple of proactive steps, which Dr. Layden covered a couple of these, and I know you've had the presentation for a couple days now, so I won't review all of them. But we have offered opt-in and opt-out structures for learning. And so we've offered each trimester students to return to hybrid. We've offered family choice for full remote, as well as medical choice that's flexible depending on the medical progress within the family and the home. We've looked at compacted curriculum. We know that they are not face-to-face every day. And so we started actually last March with our staff compacting our curriculum, looking at what reported standards go together so when we are in hybrid, we can teach in a compacted format so students will not fall behind in the curriculum learning. We do have daily monitoring, PPE, those communications of our COVID cases coming out, and constant communication with our staff that support the instructional progress of our students. Despite that, we know that there will be some impacts on learning, and so the intent is to really look at what impacts can we identify thus far, and what options can we do to remedy them immediately in the summer and for next year. You'll see on the next two slides the grade impact on learning based on the report card and the standards base from first trimester. Again, I realize first trimester has ended a while ago, but we don't have our second trimester report cards completed and finalized until next Friday. So the presentation timing just came a little before that. Overall, you can see by grade level some of the similarities. We were excited to see that full remote and hybrid were very similar to each other in standard completion, focus on the reported standard, and often the level of proficiency that the students had. This tells us that both structures are working in that format. You will see there's specific units taught differently or in a different sequence, and some in more depth just because of the structure of learning. For instance, working on 2D and 3D shapes, for an example, is a bit higher in our hybrid because the hands-on manipulation that the teacher can see with the student. Working on grammar and punctuation is a bit higher in full remote because those mini lessons are easier to see in a remote setting versus looking at the legible writing of handwriting in a Zoom meeting. Overall, some of the indicators that you'll see is at times hybrid score a little bit higher on the reported standards currently after first trimester, and then full remote are a little bit higher on others. The major, let me flip to the next one, sorry about that. The major difficulties that we are finding are really twofold, and they fall within the ELA. First, the writing conferences don't take place as frequently because students aren't on site, and in a Zoom setting, writing conferences are difficult to do because you can't see the students writing until they're in upper grades. So that day-to-day walking by, conferencing in an immediate fashion with students about details, elaboration, organization is very difficult in both of our current learning structures. We do find that the writing mini lessons tend to go towards punctuation, grammar, and kind of the paragraph organization because those are easier to monitor in our current structures when we don't have day-to-day contact with students or when we're in a Zoom remote setting. The other things we see is in full remote, it is difficult to hear reading fluency on an individual level. We have comprehension conversations with students, but to hear individual students read fluently is a difficult area to assess at this point for our full remote. That being said, we wanted to not only just look at the standards-based report cards and the levels of attainment that students have, but we wanted to compare our iReady scores in our winter window assessment. iReady is an online computerized assessment that our students take 3 times a year. The winter window falls in December and into parts of January. It can be taken remotely, during application, or on-site while you're face-to-face. We were pleased to see with our iReady, that is so hard to say, our iReady, that our scores actually are trending above the current national trend of other districts using iReady, as well as the historical norms. The historical norms are important because that is pre-COVID. How were the trends in academics kind of faring? And currently you'll see in math, as well as reading, our students are progressing higher levels than our historical norms, as well as comparison to other districts that have taken the iReady test. Overall trends at the elementary level, and you're probably not going to be surprised because we just reflected on some of them. Our iReady is definitely scoring above those trends. Our full remote learner characteristics have been a struggle. We have 7 learner characteristics on the report card, and in a full remote setting, you can't assess all 7. You can assess the ability to turn in work, listen attentively, but some of them you really need to be with the student in person to see. Our RTI full remote kindergarten is unable to look at some of the fine motor skills. Coloring within the lines has been difficult to assess, just like the penmanship and the writing of the formation of letters has been difficult in hybrid because you don't see them consistently in every day. And on full remote, it's difficult to ask the kindergartner to show their work on screen and assess it appropriately. We do have a system with our full remote where things can get turned into the schools, and the parents do a phenomenal job of bringing those pieces of work in so that we can assess them and pick up other things for our students. As I said, our writing conferences seems to be our biggest gap at this time. We do have some genres that haven't been explored in our first grade full remote because they focused heavily on grammar and punctuation previously. And we don't have elaboration, organization, and word choice as high as we have in previous years because we're missing that day-to-day conference with the writing piece right in front of us. Due to the lack of conferencing, we are seeing spelling and grammar are at much higher levels, but the actual content and depth within the writing is absolutely a gap that we need to remedy. We have noted that geometry tends to be a unit that is taught in a different sequence, full remote to hybrid. And so we've had some students transition back that did not have the geometry unit, where hybrid had already completed it. So we immediately assigned an RTI support service to give them that unit of study to keep them on track with the learning structure they opted into. Science and social studies, we've had a lot of activity on the Canvas pages for those, but we don't assess those for full remote. And so that will be an area that we look at second trimester and third trimester. Overall, here are some recommendations of what we would like to do, and hopefully in an upcoming board item later this evening, get approval for. The first one is we have taken our instructional coaches and really focused them on writing, both in hybrid and full remote. And even our RTI staff and coaches are offering office hours for students specifically in writing. There are 6 to 9 office hour opportunities for any student on application day to have direct instruction from a teacher by logging in within the hour. So I realize some schedules, I can't be in a Zoom and at office hours, so you can't go for all 6 hours of the day, but you have an opportunity even for our hybrid application students. The second one is the possibility of content tutoring. We have identified that we need more intensive writing instruction at our elementary to close the gap on some of the learning impact, and so that will be discussed. We're looking for a few tutors per school to be able to extend that intensive writing support for students. Of course, we'll continue to monitor trimester 2 and trimester 3, and starting at the end of March, we take our common assessments. our reading with Rigby, our common formative math comes up in April, and then our post-writing tests. So we can compare pre to post for the year, but also post to post and post. Honestly, we can compare it from 2 years ago prior to COVID. We want to continue to have that chain of command for non-engagement students. We have teachers that contact 3 to 5 times. That it gets into the school office with the principal and assistant principal contacting 2 times for non-engagement. And then we assign to a social worker, RTI staff, related service staff, a follow-up with the family as well to make sure we try to improve as much non-engagement of families and students if they're not logging on to Zoom or if they're not coming back to hybrid with items completed. Over the summer, we're restructuring our summer school to include seminars that are driven by the specific student needs. And so in other words, I can come to a 1-hour session on just fractions if that's the one unit that I'm not showing that I have proficiency in based on the targeted standards, but Patrick could come and do 1 hour on geometry or 1 hour on narrative writing. So that those summer school 1-hour seminars will be completely focused based on customized paths of the student need. We are continuing to prepare different writing events and activities that students can do with their families to continue writing over the summer. That in no way is to replace the core curriculum, but it absolutely can give an opportunity just to keep fresh and continue the process of writing. And then we will analyze our post data when it comes in. Next fall, we are looking for writing support in the classrooms. We have our instructional coaches already working on that training process for staff to reaffirm the genre sequence and what reported standards need to be really focused on based on where we end this year. We will recompact or resequence our curriculum. In some cases, it's compacting, not meaning that we're choosing a hybrid schedule, but we're compacting. As a 3rd grade teacher, I may need to compact and bring a 2nd grade standard into my 3rd grade and compact that within the lesson, no matter the learning structure that's implemented. And then finally, we're establishing our proficiency tables. That work was put on hold this year because we couldn't have large pools of teachers subbed out. It also, we couldn't have them in one location together due to the numbers in previous phases. And so we want to reestablish defining that student and teacher clarity through the proficiency tables work that we've talked to you about previously. Questions about the K-5?
No, I'm sorry, this is just a board meeting discussion.
In terms of accuracy,
No, sorry, this is not,
I mean, 2nd grade, 3rd grade,
sorry, you'll have to go if you can't be quiet for our meeting, thank you.
go back to the slide.
Is there any questions?
All right,
For
so
Dr.
you said compacted. So like, are we talking that you're getting 50%, 100%? What percentage would you say of the material are the K through 5 kids getting?
This school year, when we compacted, we looked at all the standards that were taught, and we compacted up to 95%. They will have exposure. The amount of repetitions they have is less this year for sure, and the amount of practice, but the exposure will be at 95%. And those reported standards are the ones that directly link to success in the next grade level. When we compact for next year, it needs to be 100%. And we compact just bringing the ones that we didn't get to and compact them with the new grade level content as they link.
So I think the word compact is confusing me. That means less or more dense. So next year you're planning on,
Teaching all of the reported standards that we've outlined.
so 100% of the content you're planning on teaching next year plus the 5% you're missing this year?
Yes, because you compact it. Like currently in 2nd grade, as I do a fraction unit, I might be exposing them to a certain reported standard that isn't proficient till the end of 3rd grade, let's say. When you do curriculum compacting, and maybe it's the language of the research of it, it just means to bring those 2 standards together and teach them in conjunction with each other at that one given time in the unit or in the lesson. Where previously, when we do the 3rd grade lesson, we would reflect back on what you learned in 2nd grade, but move on with the depth and the practice and the repetition of that standard. And that's why I say the repetition gets lessened when you compact.
Okay. So the iReady scores that you gave us, those are standard everyday test. There's been no changes in the testing methodology
No.
that was used, so.
It is an outside company that does the scoring, does write the test, do the scoring, and do the sending out. It is an online program, and the iReady company has not monitored or changed their test for the past, I believe it's 8 or 9 years. I'd have to check on the exact.
I'm just worried
number.
about last year. So they're not testing them on reduced material, they're
No.
testing them on the full standards.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, Dr. Mum, and I'm not going to hold you to actual data points, but can you generally speak to the learning loss that happens over summer, specifically maybe like in writing, like typically outside of a COVID year?
Typically we typically look at learning loss in writing and reading and math by looking at our post scores and then seeing where they come back in the fall. And with math, we see typically about an 8% dip from learning loss in the summer. Writing, we see it probably on the indicators of elaboration, we see about a 15% dip from the post to the next pre. But in typically grammar, organization, and author's purpose, it stays fairly consistent. And we have really found that in writing, those skills kind of once you have them, but elaboration and word choice really struggles with a dip as well. I don't remember off the top of my head the reading dip, to be honest.
That's a good sense for me. So would it be possible to maybe look at it in this way, that whatever we lose, if we're losing a little bit of step here in the spring, it would be comparable to what we would lose maybe in the summer, and if we're using these seminars, could we kind of course correct in that way?
You could look at it that way, yeah.
Okay.
We're really hoping that the seminars will help. And it is just for the month of June. It doesn't go into July. But we have an early start in August coming back around the 11th with students. And so we're hoping that that gap in July, because of the early start, is remedied a little bit. And what we can pick up with the summer school seminars will increase the gap that is created from spring, but also reduce some of the summer regression.
Right.
Dr. Mum, can you talk a little bit more? Compacting is really hard for a lot of us to think about, right? So I know when parents have talked to me about it, the perception is like, if you took 2 days worth of material that you normally would teach, it's happening in 1 day, and they get no opportunity to practice, to ask questions, and then on their day off, it's just kind of figure it out. That's kind of what people are thinking. So can you walk us through like a 2-day into a 1 day and what that really is looking like?
Ideally, when you compact in theory, and then we can talk about practice a little bit.
Sure.
In theory, you do take those 2 targeted standards or whatever standards you would have done on day 1 and day 2, and you do the formal direct instruction and conversation, whether it be peer-to-peer conversation or teacher-to-student conversation on the face-to-face day, and then all the application work that in a traditional setting you would have done right after I did the direct instruction is all placed on the second day. And so that's why at times it feels like this is just application and practice work. It is. You would have been doing that in a traditional setting. After I do my 15-minute mini lesson, you would have had a half hour, let's say, of practice and application. That practice and application gets shifted to your application day when you are at home.
So our students, especially our younger students, which is where you are, supposed to be able to remember that lesson and then do it at home? Do we have recordings that they can access? Things of that nature?
In some cases, the teachers have posted recordings. In some cases, they've posted written directions to recall that direct instruction. There's definitely teachers that are probably stronger at that than others. And anytime that we've had some issues of confusion that have been brought to our attention or principal's attention, we go on to Canvas and look at the assignments and see where that link has been lost. And then many times work with an instructional coach who works with that teacher to improve what's being posted on Canvas when it's been brought to our attention.
So I know that some of our teachers have been pretty hesitant to allow for like zooming in on your off days. And that's another conversation that I would love to explore. Is there a reason we can't require a recording so that they can go back and watch it the next day?
We do have some regulations with our unions.
Okay, Todd, is that something you can expand on?
I would just say to follow up with Dr. Mumm, there are some, based on the memorandum of understanding and some contractual provisions that we do have that we would have to look at and revisit and have some shared conversations on.
But it would be fair to say, I mean, we signed those memorandums and came to an agreement with those unions, right? So,
It's been collaborative all along. Yes, sir.
Collaborative, yeah.
We've worked together all along on those agreements.
But something worth exploring again.
certainly. Yeah.
We do have the opportunity to for office hours. I can't stress that enough. It is not the classroom teacher, that is absolutely true. But it is a response intervention teacher that is a classroom teacher and often certified with a master's degree in that content that are available to, if I'm confused because I've read it on Canvas and I still don't understand it, or I've looked at it on my handout and I don't understand it, that's the intent of the office hour. I can log on and say, here's what I think I should be doing. The RTI office hour staff can look at that teacher's Canvas and assist the student in how to do that application practice work.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I have some questions about summer school. When you talk about the seminars, are those going to be, like, students would be identified from the standards and from the proficiency?
It is not
That
invitation
you would
only.
say, your
It's-
child needs to come and do fraction work at this, or we recommend these seminars?
I think there's going to be both. It's open to any student.
would
And
be.
so a parent and a family can look at the second trimester report card or have a conversation with the teacher, and a parent can choose to sign their child up for it. Once they are signed up, we review their end report card, their end assessments, and we make a customized path for that child. And there will also be some encouragement from the teachers to certain students that they would love to see. They'll encourage them to consider attending the seminars. But it is not, in the past, I know we've had some summer school that's invitation only, and the seminars are not that way.
And
It's
then-
open to anyone.
And then my next question would be for Dr. Leahy. Because of the unprecedented nature of the school year, is there any way that we could look into numbers for having no-cost summer school? So that parents could just opt to do it to recover some of that loss? Is it worth, I mean, I don't know if other board members would be interested in seeing some kind of cost for that, so, just so that, you know, everyone would feel more free and more able to participate in those types of things without cost.
Yeah, we have had some of that, that internal dialogue surrounding that and the costs and how to try to have some of those offsets. So that is something that we have had those conversations and we can bring back to the board.
Please.
Other board members are okay with that?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
I think we're ready.
Is this kind of related to the third subject?
The J3?
J3, yeah.
Is that kind of related to that question?
Like summer school.
No, this is the, J3 is more for what we're going to do through the remainder of the year. What I think
All right.
Board Member Witt was asking about was for summer.
Yeah, probably so wasn't, yeah.
I'm double masked.
You done, Teresa?
Pardon me?
You done?
Yes.
All right, cool. Dr. Mom, you talked about the iReady scores, and they look, to me, like, wow, we're still above the national average, we're above the historical average. And now, this is back for 11 months, right? So pretty much all COVID, right?
Those tests were taken this past December.
So it's part of, so we were in
And
the
into
COVID
January.
stages, if you will, right?
Say that again?
So this is during COVID?
Yes. Yep.
So,
It's a reflection of our fall semester because it was taken in December and January.
okay, so did you take a peek at prior to COVID? Were we in the same, do we fall similar to that? Or do we do better or worse than what we did prior to COVID?
Prior to COVID, we had some grade levels that were at the national norm and a couple that were below. Our fourth and fifth grade tended to be right about where we are right now. So we are consistent with fourth and fifth grade where they previously scored. Second grade tended to be below the norm. I can't recall third grade off the top of my head, but I could get that to you.
And I just wanted to see, I know you had looked at it, and I just wanted to hear you out on it. So we're at least staying the course, if you will?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
To piggyback on that, and again, general is fine for me. Are you seeing that because those scores are reflecting an improvement, or at least, status quo, are you seeing that we're trading one thing for another, or are we maintaining successes in the same things that we did prior to COVID?
I think there probably has been some gives in writing instruction during the hybrid and definitely full remote, because you can't have that same amount of interaction with the student consistently. And so that's why we're seeing writing definitely is a bigger gap in deficit. In replace of that, are they getting more, depth in math? Possibly. They have still the same schedules where the time frames are the same, but the writing seems to be taking the biggest hit. So I guess it's kind of a give and take in that place.
So, I mean, is it fair to say
don't know
that,
if it's direct.
even in a normal school year, we have deficits in one area, so we're going to see something totally different in a different delivery model?
Correct.
Okay.
The one thing I think we have to realize too is we have response intervention staff and they focus on math and reading. We do not have response intervention staff that necessarily have ever focused on intervention specific to writing.
Sure.
That was part of our MTSS rollover that was to happen next fall, but now has been delayed another fall.
I was going to ask you about that. So MTSS is paused, is that correct?
It is paused, yes.
So we're maintaining the RTI model until some sense of normalcy?
22, 23.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the last thing I was going to say, it seems like we have an opportunity, right, to kind of look at this glass half full, an opportunity to look at some personalized learning models, right? Especially when we're talking about looking at the seminars over the summer, and the compacting that's happening, and then the office hours, right? So can you tell me, or can you speak to, like, how are we implementing more personalized learning in these situations?
I think we're kind of definitely the summer seminars blow that wide open. To be able to make a customized path with the students that sign up and register for that seminar is truly the essence of personalized learning. And what we've talked about getting to that final cell of personalized learning is customized paths.
Right.
The other thing that has happened because of the lower section sizes, when you split your class in half, you tend to have anywhere from 6 to 17 students in front of you on any one given day. They're having the ability to have some more individualization and some personalization based on their progress. So we do see some students that have had higher math continuums currently in the fall semester, because I have 8 that I'm working with versus the class of 22, 24. So has that given us some success in math and reading? Probably. I don't know if it's a direct correlation, but absolutely we're seeing more of that individualizing. The difficulty of social distancing is you don't have as much peer-to-peer interaction or small group work, but the flip side of that is you have more one-on-one individualization conversations with your teacher, because that's your primary feedback, not the peer-to-peer small group. So I do see essence of, in visiting the classrooms, I do see more and more of the kind of the students at this spot, the students at that spot, and that is our ultimate goal for personalized learning.
Sure. Okay, so I lied. I have one more. So prior to having to, kind of scrap all of our models and move forward, we were really in the process of like reinventing the way we do education, right? Like we were using standards-based learning, personalized learning, like we were in this forward mode, right? We have to pause that, but then some of it still seems like it's spilling through, right? So could that be one of the issues that we're seeing when it's coming to trying to explain what we're trying to do and trying to accomplish, where it seems like, okay, well, we're not making these things, but really we are. It's just, it's in a much different way than, probably most of us ever grew up with, right?
For sure. We have these conversations all the time, and the personalized learning coordinator is also in our office. And so a couple things that we have been reviewing recently is really looking at the personalized learning steering committee work and celebrating, in some cases, we've made some leaps on some things that were later in the timeline because of the structures we've had to go to with COVID. The other thing that we just had the pleasure of looking at this week were the learner profiles, where students assess their advocacy and what they would do to advocate for themselves. And we have students advocating for their learning in different ways. than we previously had to in the past. And sometimes it's advocating in the home, sometimes it's advocating with a peer, where in the past it was I could go to my teacher to advocate, and that's not what we saw in the profiles this year.
Right.
It was I have a lot more resources to advocate with, so that was definitely a step in the right direction. And then finally, the last thing that we've been looking at is absolutely the strategic plan that will roll out next year. And when we look at the one-to-one learning strand, a lot of the goals that we had for this year while on pause have been accomplished, as well as some of next year's. And so we need to relook at that plan and kind of align the goals. While some of them definitely we have to take some steps back in, the one-to-one learning, obviously, we've made some great gains in.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you know, hindsight's 20/20, right? So
Right.
you look back and you think, well, doing a lot of this stuff was great because it helped us in some areas, but there's also critique then because it hurt us in others, right? So, you know, but we, you know, no way of foreseeing that. So.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other question? Okay. A little clarification on the writing. So for years, our writing scores have always suffered a little bit. They've not been as good as, you know, our reading and math. It's been pretty typical. So I'm wondering if you're saying that they're worse than.
I am. We started, since we had an adoption, oh gosh, has it been 3 years? We really started to make huge progress in our post-to-post score. I think it's 4 years. The post-to-post scores, and seeing especially elaboration and word choice really coming higher on those rubrics. And so that the gains that we were making have somewhat stalled out, and especially in those two areas, we have regressed.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
One of the most common things that I hear, and my kids included, is that their home days, there isn't enough structure and material to keep them occupied for an approximation of a school day. So how is that monitored on a teacher-by-teacher basis, and what can we do to, it seems to be a common refrain, not just my kids, but most kids don't seem to be putting in the time that we're hoping for on their off days?
I think we do a couple things, but honestly, it can be at times overwhelming. We have the administrative team, myself in Ed Service, and the Department of Ed Service continually doing spot checks on the Canvas postings of teachers. We've asked all teachers to give us their Canvas link so that we can go in as a student and spot check, just like we would do learning walks. I would go out and visit the classrooms to see how that application is happening live in person. My learning walks this year are jumping onto Canvas pages and looking at those assignments. Do I find every possible issue? No, I don't. I don't in a traditional year either, but the administrative team uses that structure of monitoring through learning walks by looking at those application pieces. We have had I've had very directive conversations with staff after A, seeing stuff myself, B, hearing concerns from a parent, or C, hearing comparisons between teacher to teacher. Here's what I have posted, here's what my colleague has posted. We immediately go have those conversations with staff. We don't allow it to persist. Are we finding it all? Probably not.
No, I guess, let me try again.
Okay.
We're 6 months into this model. It seems like it should have been standardized by now that all of the teachers should be doing a relatively similar volume of required days, B-day work or class load. So it's not a scientific observation by any means, but anecdotal evidence, thank you, is saying that that isn't up to par. So I would strongly suggest that that needs to be looked at again.
I think the guidelines have been consistent. It is getting there between that 2.5 to 3 hours of learning. Because yes, when you're in school, you may have 6 hours, but you take out the lunch, recess, exploratories, those things. The application work comes closer to 2.5 to 3 hours. And so that guideline has been set. The difficulty is we haven't said you must post, video followed by handout followed by this, because we really need them, just like they would do in traditional, to create that work that meets that time frame based on the student's progress and where they are in the learning progression. And so I I wouldn't regulate specifically.
No, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm
Okay.
not saying you have to tell them how to do it.
Yep.
But I don't feel like they're getting to the 2.5 to 3 hours. And I'm not saying that I think most teachers are trying their best, and the administration too is doing the best they can with a bad situation. I just think that this one particular piece could be improved upon.
We can take it to our Educator Advisory Committee. We meet monthly. The 15th is our next one, and I can bring that concern of how can we internally monitor that 2.5 to 3 hours for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
So to piggyback on kind of what Ryan's saying, I do wonder, and I'm assuming you have an explanation for it. Like, my kid spends some time on his screen, and then he spends a lot of time on a packet, right? And I wonder, like, is there a reason we don't spend, like, do you have a justification, maybe is a better way to say it, of why we're not spending so much time on the screen, and then why the packet, and then why not choice C?
I think the interesting part is in traditional school, what you don't see is they have packet work in theory too.
Sure.
It's just spread out among the content throughout the day. When you put all of that together, it looks like a daunting packet. In traditional setting, I would be doing a reading mini lesson. I would have them work in their journal on something.
Sure.
I may do a writing, and then they do a handwriting sheet. When you take all those application pieces out, it does look like a packet.
Right.
But that's what you would see in a classroom visiting in a traditional setting. The screen time is interesting because I've heard complaints both ways.
Right.
I've heard, the teacher that assigns iReady, iExcel, and Reflex Math, I don't want my kid on for 3 hours, doing the application of the screen time. So we've had those conversations with staff, balance it between the written piece and the screen time, and really do it developmentally based on the kids you have. There's some students that, as I've gotten to know them and observed them as the classroom teacher, they are much more in tune to the written piece of it. Just like in a traditional setting, we would accommodate and individualize for them and give them more the written work. We would personalize for the student that shows more engagement in iExcel and Reflex. In a traditional school, that's what they would be doing for their practice work.
Sure.
And so we're trying to continue to meet the kids' needs based on their learner profile, who they are, how they engage the most, and pull all those application pieces that would be sporadic throughout the day. You just are seeing them as parents in one setting on the application day.
Yeah, I would say it works better with at least my kid when we pull the pages apart.
Yes.
And then he doesn't see them all as, because he looks at it, he's like, I got 20 pages of homework and I'm 6. Like, and it's a lot, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. But so we pull them apart and then okay, this is the only one we have to do today, right?
Yes.
And then he's like, can I go on Reflex? I'm like, no, you already spent all day on there. So, but because, he likes the screen. So, yeah.
Right. And really to the learner's engagement, I have two the exact same age, and one would want a 50-page packet because that's her learning style.
Sure.
And the other would want it in 10-minute chunks that I would share with them.
Okay,
And so we're
this is
trying
the
to
struggle,
find
right?
ways to do that.
So I know we can be here all night. I mean, Pat hasn't even come up. But I have one more question. So we measure how we provide content, how we read some of how the students are reacting and such. One thing we haven't touched on is the mental aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
How are we measuring that?
We have a couple of different ways, and the reason it didn't appear in this presentation is because we were guided to make it purely academic.
Okay.
And the social emotional comes in the spring when we really look at some of the student handbook, the Swiss referrals, those types of things. Just a brief, quick overview of what you'll see when we get to that in the spring is we constantly have those conversations with guidance counselors, social workers. We have the list of kind of our check-in students. Who do we need? Are they non-engagement because of a mental health concern or non-engagement because of an academic overwhelmness? And then we have interventions. We just bought tons of interventions from Second Step, from 2 other companies that I've completely lost my train of thought on, and the mentor text that we're having the social work and the teacher staff go in and model both small group and whole group. We're monitoring our Swiss referrals, which are considerably down, but we also have very low class sizes, so that's not super surprising. And then looking at the reflections that students submit in exit slips to their teachers. If there's concerns within the exit slips, they go right to the response to intervention team, who then sets up a directive, targeted study hall, targeted our office hours with them, or family calls home from the social worker, the AP, or the principal.
Right,
But you'll see more of that comprehensive look. It's not as easy, to be honest, as the percents on iReady. It's finding different ways to monitor the mental health.
So, yeah, just to reiterate, there's tons of subject matters we can go after, and we'd be here all night. But I just had to throw that one in. Man, I'm glad that you're looking at it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rowley?
Thank you, guys. A lot of what we're going to talk about as far as impact on learning for our middle school and our high school students is somewhat similar to what Dr. Mumm had shared. The subject area tends to be a little bit different, and we're seeing that not only in Kaneland, but with our comparable districts and really across the country, as far as we're not seeing as many needs in writing as we are in the full scope of English language arts, but more so in our mathematics instructor. A couple quick facts up there of what we've looked at. The data points, truly going to try to give you two main ones for each grade. And I know you've had that, but it holds true for our middle school, and we'll break it down between the middle school and high school. Looking at our local data reports, and that's going to come in the form of Fs that have appeared on a report card. Locally looking at that, and then we've compared it. We've had the ability to compare that at the middle school with iReady, similar to what the elementary school has done. Again, same parameters around that test. It's from the same company. It's administered right around the same time frame. So looking at those two differences, and as we go through this, I know we've spoken a little bit about it, but there are a lot of factors that went into our student achievement for this year, and most notably is going to be COVID. We were not able to replicate this year the instruction that we've had in the past when we could be here on site full time. With that being said, as we have attended webinars, as we've looked into best practices in the immediacy of COVID, we've pulled on research in looking at past, not necessarily pandemics, but looking at outcomes when school systems have been disrupted for an extended period of time, notably in Louisiana with Hurricane Katrina. We've looked at other countries across the world where, again, there's been large gaps for a variety of different reasons when school systems had to have been shut down. And a lot of that research has been used to drive things that we've done this year. When we've talked about compacting curriculum, our middle school and our high school went through that same process. A little bit of those differences. Our middle school and high school departments and teams are in a little bit different of a place when it comes to our reported standards, as we were just starting that transition to standards-based grading. What we have seen is those that have made that full transition based on the timeline prior to COVID that we've laid out, those practices embedded in the classroom, we've seen a lot of success with, notably feedback, timely feedback, in-person feedback. So when we had the disruption of COVID and we had alternating days with our hybrid model, we saw some disruption and inability to give that timely feedback. We tried to make some adjustments to our schedules moving forward. We have a Wednesday synchronous learning, afternoon learning to address some of those needs. Thus far, we've seen a lot of really positive success from that. The data that you have in front of you is through the first semester, so that had stopped around December 18th. Since then, we had that new Wednesday structure put in place. We are seeing a lot of support from teachers, from instructional coaches, to be able to streamline the instruction a little bit better, to have it flow a little bit more smoothly. But truly what we know is that that feedback piece is critical to our students, and that structure has allowed us to provide more direct feedback to our kids. And the other thing to look at, and we're going to talk about what probably jumps off the map the most, is our math. We are in the first year of a brand new math curriculum. We've talked about it. I know we've shared in the past of what some of that implementation dip and how that affects students. We're experiencing that. So we're confident that once we can continue to dive into this, that curriculum is going to help pull us through some of these tougher areas. That tool is unlike tools that we've had in the past. where it's a line from 6th grade really through the first 2 or 3 years of high school in through our Algebra 2, and there's been some other courses beyond Algebra 2, but looking at a full-scale rollout for 6-12, we found some really strong commonalities that we hope are going to be able to help ease some of this impact on learning. So with all of that being said, if we look at our data, as we go through grade level by grade level, looking at report cards, we see anywhere between 8 to the highest is a little over 14% of F grades. And that's important. In the middle school, it breaks out a little bit more cleanly of the F grades of grade to student. But again, in the data we have, we're anywhere between 8 to 14%. Historically, we're about 3 to 5%, 3 to 6% in some of the higher ones. So we have seen an uptick in the number of students that have received an F in one subject or another through the first semester. With that being said, those students have still received instruction since we pulled this data. Best practice in research that we've been collaborating with other districts, other instructional leaders. Really that best practice is to keep moving forward. We know that if we were to put on pause all of the learning that we had scheduled to try to address some of these gaps, it just creates larger gaps. So as we continue to move forward with our compacted standards, with our priority standards, we're finding ways through our student support teams, through grade level team meetings, individual student problem solving teams to address those that need a little bit of extra support. Because we had to put some of those things on hold that we have mentioned, we have not been able to give as intensive professional development in feedback, in standards that we had originally laid out to start the year. We didn't want to pull teachers. We know that time was valuable. We didn't want to pull teachers during the day, and that's where the bulk of our professional development happened. So as we've looked at mitigating some of that impact, we have our local data, but then we've compared that to our iReady data for our middle school. And what we've seen with that has been similar to what we've seen at the elementary schools. It is slightly less in our scores of students that are at or above grade level and just slightly below grade level. It's slightly less than what Kaneland Middle School, Harner Middle School has achieved in the past, but when we look at that and compare that again, similar to what elementary did, we looked at historically across the country, and just this past year to the norms coming in from across the country, other districts, there's countless in Illinois that use it, countless of our comparable districts that use it. Our students, even though we've seen some of that impact with our report card data and our local data, our students are still learning above the national average, not only compared to last year, but compared to the last 4 years. So impact has been there, but for our national data, our students in Kaneland are scoring above that.
On this chart, the national data, is that historical average or is that this year?
This one in particular is last year's. I have it broken down in a 4-year average that I can provide to you, but that one bar, it got a little bit too difficult to read, so that gray bar up there is the national average for this year.
I'm sorry. You confused me. I thought I heard both answers. So the gray bar, that's a 4-year historical average, or that's the national average
That's
this
the
year?
national average for this year. The orange is the current in this slide is our 6th grade, it's the current year, and then the blue was Harder's last year data.
All right, so generally speaking, in a COVID country, our school district is doing better than the national average in 6th grade reading.
Correct. We scored at about 44% of our students were at or above grade level, and then in the nation, that's right at about 30. And then it is for the better for that third bar graph right there. Those are 2 or more grade levels below. We are at 25%, and historically, that's about 40% of students are 2 or more grade levels below.
So that chart reads backwards in the first two, meaning we're doing better than the national average, even though the chart just is confusing me because national average is bigger than the rest of it, but it means we're doing better than the national average.
Correct. We
Thank
have
you.
less students that have a significant impact on their learning. We have less students that are 2 grade levels or below compared to the nation.
Thank you.
When you talk about 2 levels below, could you explain that to me?
So the iReady test is an adaptive test as students go through and they progress based on how they answer the questions adjust to their answers. So I may take that test or that assessment as a 7th grader. The more and more I answer correctly, the higher grade level questions they're going to give to me. Similarly, if I'm not answering them correctly, it scales it down. So I can get an iReady score of anywhere of on grade level to a grade level above. And then they do that in the reverse. They back it up to, you can dig down and dig pretty deep into it, but it goes into 1 grade level below and 2 or more grade levels below.
So it's personalized at one point or another?
It's adaptive to each student that takes it, yes.
Thank you.
7th grade, we're seeing very similar things. We're seeing our failure rates of about anywhere between 8 to 14%. When we compare this to comparable districts here in Illinois, we work with those, Dr. Mum and myself. We meet with them monthly, other curriculum leaders, and we also have networked with school districts through the LUDA Association, the Large Unit District Association, and have had some meetings to take a look at the impact that COVID has had. And we're hearing reports back of those failure rates, some districts upwards of 30 or 40%. So while we know that we have some work to do, and we have some of those wheels in motion already, we're grateful that we're not seeing those percentages that are as high as 30, 40, 50% of students that have failed a class. Again, you'll see the same thing with iReady for our 7th graders. Again, not as where we want to be, not where we were at last year. This bar graph reads the same for 7th grade, where we see that we are just slightly outperforming the national average at or above grade level or 1 below, and then that reverse, we don't have as many students in 7th grade. The same will hold true pretty much for 8th grade. The one caveat that we see and that we've started to problem solve a little bit, our failure rates in 8th grade are higher than where they were, than they are with our 6th and 7th grade. We are looking at individual students. When we look at that difference, we're talking about 40 or 50 students. The positive is that we have weekly consult meetings to look at our 8th grade population. We do have some individual plans that are put in place for our most at-risk students, and then we'll talk a little bit in the recommendations of how these students have already registered for courses in high school. So really trying to be specific in what is going to be their best path for success as freshmen. But again, when we look at some of the iReady data, we're seeing the same trend there. Our students, even those 8th graders, even though we have a larger number of failures at 8th grade, our students are learning when we compare them to their peers across the country.
But for the 8th grade English and language, we got, what, if 15% of our kids are failing?
Yes. About 14.5%.
So, Mr. Raleigh, is there something going on with the compacting of the 8th grade curriculum?
It's gone through the same process. There are some internal pieces, perhaps. Some of again, with a transition to a new year, we have a new principal. We also have some different teams that have been set up compared to in the past. The process for compacting that curriculum has been the same process that our 6th and 7th grade teams have done. There's nothing drastic that stood out one way or another. We have a higher number of remote students in 8th grade. We had a fairly significant number of students that were quarantined, but not statistically significant at the 8th grade level. So there are a couple key there are some variables that we're looking at, but nothing that jumps out that these students didn't have the same opportunity that their 6th and 7th grade peers did.
Okay.
And in those cases, we are sitting down, we have small problem-solving teams. We are able, because that number is more of a manageable number and we don't have essentially cross-grade level teachers, we're able to kind of pinpoint who they are and start to really tailor what has been the second semester. We're almost through our 3rd term now, but we're able to put in some particular interventions in place for those students that are most at risk.
All right, so these 15%, is that end of 3rd quarter, end of first semester? When is that? When is this data point?
End of 1st semester. So those were grades that were pulled December 18th.
Okay, but it sounds like there isn't one particular factor that's sticking out that's pointing to you to saying that this is what's wrong and this is what we need to fix.
Correct.
So I guess can you elaborate a little bit more on how we're going to tackle this?
Sure. So breaking down, I'm looking at it's roughly about 50 students. We would look at those 50 students, what standards they're at in class, how they're progressing through, and start to build a plan in place, whether that is instructional coaches working with the teachers on a given standard, a given instructional practice. It could be looking at if we can change up their study hall somehow where it's a little bit more targeted into those specific standards that they're looking at. We do have some ability to be a little bit fluid with our RTI. Those numbers are a little bit higher this year. So it's taking a look at those 50 students and starting to pinpoint exactly where some of those deficiencies are to impact them.
Okay, so 3rd semester is up in a couple weeks.
March 12th, I believe, is the end of 3rd quarter.
Can we get new numbers on this on March 12th, please?
For sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I'm sorry if I missed this, but, and you may have said it, do we think these are the same students who are failing multiple classes, or is it one-offs?
That is, I can provide that information to you as well.
In the March?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. I have it. I can condense it into an articulate.
Perfect. Thank you.
So will we be hearing about these specific groups, like when we talk about the targeted tutoring later? I mean, is that?
That is what is meant by our targeted tutoring. So we are in the process. We've had some discussions in hopes that we could be approved for some of that tutoring. We talked last week on what those parameters would be, but it would be pinpointing some of these students.
Okay, so I guess I wanted to know specifically, is it just these students? Or, and these students are included in that, it's not students that are, you know, in some other evaluative process rather than this? I'm wondering if you're going to focus in on this data to assign the kids that need tutoring.
We've talked about that being the primary data point of looking at those students that have failed courses. And we have a limited number. We wanted to keep that number smaller so teachers can have more of that individual relationship with students, but we would be using their report card data as one of the main drivers for that, of identifying those students.
Okay. I don't want to have anybody called out, but are we finding that these tend to cluster in certain classes? Are there certain teachers we're finding we need to focus on?
We have not seen that come through.
Okay. And then my next question beyond how in the world are we fixing this is, this is a significant number of Fs in a year that not their fault. So how are we keeping that from impacting their futures?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Are we doing any grade mitigation, for lack of a better term, this year, given that we're having so many Fs?
For example, I think I heard Sycamore decided they're not giving out Fs, they're just doing
incompletes. Mm-hmm. Are we doing anything like that?
We have in the first semester, depending on, we've looked at the reasons why students were not in attendance. And we were able to issue an insufficient evidence for students that were COVID related. So if they were out for multiple quarantines, and they didn't have the opportunity to receive that instruction, then they received an insufficient evidence. If they had received the instruction and did not assess well, then they were scored on a traditional grading system. And then we looked at, again, between a variety of different teams. Our middle school teams meet daily, our consult teams meet weekly, our administrative team meets all the time. So looking at those students that have received those insufficient evidence, that was easier we could target those standards. And again, looking at what interventions we can put in place, how we can target study halls, how we can provide more information through Canvas, through feedback on. We have a variety of different tools for providing feedback. So we've started to pinpoint those students as well.
So how is that equitable? It sounds like you all went through and said this student deserves not to get enough, this student didn't do well enough, or they weren't in quarantine. I mean, we have families that are at home whose parents can't help them, so even if they weren't in quarantine, maybe they really are further behind because of the system right now. So why are we not blanketly saying if you get an F, this is what we're going to do?
We looked at it through the lens of instructional days and instruction received. Students that have submitted work, that have received feedback on that work, and have had the opportunity to, in their hybrid model, to engage in teachers on that feedback process. Those students that have gone through that, they receive the grade of the evidence in which they've submitted something for that. When students weren't able to do that, and at the time, again, the first semester with multiple quarantines and some other issues, positive tests, and they didn't have the opportunity to submit that work that they've done anything, they received an insufficient evidence for that particular class.
Are we finding lots of other schools doing it that way? Because I've definitely not heard of schools handpicking students to receive Fs and not receive Fs.
I don't know if we're necessarily handpicking them. It was due to the circumstance of them being out and not having the opportunity to turn in that work because of the CDC, because of release letters for a variety of different reasons, these students were not allowed into our building. So for those students, they didn't have the opportunity to show evidence of learning.
Is that common to like a medical issue in a prior year? Like I had a surgery, so I'm out for 4 weeks. Is that a similar parallel or no?
That piece, I'm not entirely sure. I'm happy to look into it. There have been, I know we've done grade changes similarly. I can think of specific examples at the high school where they have been able to do some of those pieces.
So Patrick, so we talk about students that are quarantined. Are they not taught when they're at quarantine?
Our students are accessing materials online, but they don't have access to live instruction while they are quarantined.
So isn't that like similar to those that are remote? Wouldn't we try to?
No, the remote students, they have regular schedules, whether they are quarantined or not, because they're home with their students. It's more of the students that have been quarantined as they would, like you talked about President Sparber, her question, if somebody's home, they get the medical work while they're home, so that would be the same as the quarantine.
So it's just treated like any other medical issue, right? So if someone had a surgery, like you said, Shauna, or okay.
Yeah, and while that's not ideal, that's the current practice that we have.
Sure.
I was asking about the incompletes or the insufficient
It just seems like we're like set to be able to do something like this, meaning we were doing remote and non-remote. We should be able to fit them in. I mean, they're at home. Who are they gonna harm? I mean, it just makes sense to me. I don't know. But I can appreciate the statement in reference to breaking a leg or whatever, and you come and get.
I was asking about insufficient evidence, but.
I mean, something similar to that, though. I mean, I can appreciate that, but I mean, we're already doing it. It just makes no sense to me because the students are losing so much education. I get it. But at the same time, it is a struggle. And the administration has tried and done so much, including teachers, not to leave anybody out, everybody from the cleaners all the way to the top. You guys have done so much. And there's little, I get it, there's some little gaps here and there, but I mean, we're set up for remote. Why not include them in some of the other classes?
It also sounds like you need the information to determine whether or not it's an issue of engagement versus an issue of mastery. Right? Those seem like two different issues.
Correct.
That would require two very different solutions. Is that a fair?
Correct, yep.
Yeah.
And we've seen that across multiple school districts that we've worked with.
Not an open forum.
Additional recommendations?
Sorry, Mr. Rowley, you guys please be quiet so we can continue the meeting.
Similar to what we've explored with the elementary schools, currently ways that we're trying to address this would be, again, when available, and this really takes digging into some individual student schedules and staff that are available at time, but trying to be a little bit more directive and specific with targeted study halls and what students are working on during that time. That is a dedicated time during the day where we can start to layer in some intervention. We are looking and asking the board to allow us to provide after-school tutoring. In the process, again, not too long ago did we meet with the administrative team to discuss the idea, but starting to look at availability of certified content teachers to target really looking at our math and our English language arts. Again, when we saw the scores, those tended to be the highest. When we looked at what we could offer and working with other districts, that tended to be the most immediate response from, I think, of countless comparable districts, and then those across the state that are in a similar demographics that fall in that LUDA association. But being able to offer tutoring after school, we would look into that, or hopefully can get approved for a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with the availability of office hours on Wednesday for students to engage. Again, knowing best practice and everything that we have researched thus far, we are continuing to work with our teachers to move our teaching forward. You may hear the word acceleration. Acceleration is not how we typically associate it with, if you think of 7th grade accelerated math. Simply put, we want to make sure that we're not putting learning on pause to close gaps, because and again, talking about other situations where school systems have been closed for a significant amount of time, that has not proven as a reliable way of closing those gaps. So we're continuing forward with our reported standards, our priority standards that have been compacted, and looking at some of these other opportunities, as stated up here, to help close some of those gaps. And then again, looking at that student contact, that family contact, we're starting immediately with, we always have with our teachers, engaging students through Zoom, engaging families through phone calls, written correspondence. If that's not being successful, we can escalate it to our student support teams, our administrative teams, our deans, and trying our best to really pinpoint why students aren't engaging. Is it accessibility? Is it technology? Is it other circumstances that are happening in the home? So we do have a team and a pretty thorough plan in place to look at how we can continue to engage those non-engaged students thus far. Over the summertime, historically, over the summertime, there have been very minimal middle school offerings. We are looking to expand that. We have, through COVID funds, purchased a larger library through Edmentum. Edmentum is an online platform with, at this point, in what we have purchased, hundreds of different courses. So we are looking to increase that offering over the summertime. And then again, similar to what Dr. Mumm had explained, I'm looking to offer some of those seminar in the content areas, those smaller hour-long targeted to individual students, individual standards. And then next year, again, looking at, as we've started to have some increased conversations on that transition from RTI to MTSS, with where we're at, seeing at what different interventions do we have that are possible, really looking at any way that we can engage RTI staff, RTI intervention time, and then progress monitoring those students throughout the year.
When you looked at, I appreciate the hybrid remote kind of breakout for the Fs, but did you look at any other characteristics like number of times that they've been quarantined or students on IEPs, either any other factors that might contribute to the students who are getting an F, or some equity issues of finding certain groups of students who are impacted more than others?
We have all of that information. We have students that are on 504s and IEPs. What we tend to see is that usually their goals and their goal settings are pretty specific to their learning needs. For those students that showed a high enough need, we have brought some of those students back 5 days a week into a very small and controlled setting to address some IEP concerns. As far as students that are on multiple quarantines, we have the list of them. And again, it's working with them while they're out, providing as much information as possible. Our Wednesday structure allows for more interaction and more contact time with those students, so trying to close some gaps during that time. But we have, I think we're upwards of about 150 students that have been quarantined, some of those multiple times. So truly trying to figure out, are those, and not by no means, when I looked at that list of 150, 160 or so, I think we're looking at, there's roughly about 20 to 25 that had received an F. So there's not a direct association. If I'm quarantined, I'm struggling and failing my classes. There are some. And again, with that manageable a number, we're looking to problem solve individually what we can do for them.
Any more questions about the middle school?
Our high school is, again, what we look at as far as content-wise. We continue to see math and ELA, or excuse me, math and English as the two most impacted subjects and departments. We are looking at an increase historically. We're right around 9% of F grades that were earned through the first semester, and we are at 393 Fs, so that's increased about 5%. We have about 81 students that have earned 2 or more Fs. We do see a larger impact of a failure rate for our students that are remote compared to those that are hybrid. And again, we're continuing to look at, because it's not necessarily skill acquisition or learning, there is engagement with some of those students. There is opportunities to log on to classes. So we're trying to look at exactly what those are. And for students that we've identified as not engaging, similar process to the middle school. There's those teams in place, starting with the teacher and working and escalating all the way up to our administrative team and our dean that are reaching out to those families. Historically, looking at some of this data to see how it's impacting our students, this chart, if you look at it, if you look at the seniors when they were freshmen, the average GPA was a little less than 3. The average GPA after the first semester was 3.1. So we've seen almost a steady increase in our seniors. Very similar, not necessarily a steady increase. We saw a slight dip in our sophomores and juniors. Where we're seeing and where we're working with our administrative team and our student support team is truly looking at those freshmen. Our freshmen this year tend to be a little slightly behind where their peers have been historically as freshmen. And then when we break that down and looking at the credits earned, we see a similar trend with our seniors. They're right about where they were when they were freshmen. We look at the metric of it ends up being 2.75 credits per semester in order for them to earn the 22 credits that they need in order to graduate. So we are looking, that 84.7% represents those freshmen that have at least 2.75 credits. When we look at the number of students with that, second. We're talking about 21 students. If we hold a benchmark of typically where we're right about the 91% at this time. We're looking at about 21 kids. So we do have small teams of administrators, our support staff, our counselors. There's a lot of people that are looking at those specific students to see what individually can we do to target them. I don't want to breeze through this information. It shares a lot of what we've seen and trends that we've seen with our middle school. I know you guys have had this information. We're seeing our math and our English department as two of the most impacted. It's broken down by grade level. But when we talk about not only those freshmen, those that have failed multiple classes, we need to be able to offer them some direct support. So as we continue to problem solve, some of the barriers that we've run into simply have been that we have maximized our staff. Our RTI and MTSS staff are addressing the needs of our most immediate students. So with that, we are asking for an opportunity to offer tutoring services for our high school students as well, looking at similar parameters, trying to prioritize students that have failed a required class or graduation required class, students that have multiple Fs, those that are behind that threshold for credits earned in order to graduate and graduate on time. So we're trying to put together that list to identify those students that are in the most immediate need of some assistance after school. And again, same process that all of our staff has gone through as far as teaching our standards, moving forward and accelerating through with our priority standards. Again, I know I've mentioned it, but we have that same process for trying to engage families. Over the summer, we're looking at some of those targeted summer school supports. We have our 3 standard classes as far as government, personal finance, and communication skills. If we can encourage students to take that, those are credits earned. That could free up some opportunities come the fall for other options and other options or other opportunities for them to recover a credit, to take a different course. So we can start to, again, personalize what those schedules look like. And then again, looking at next year, we have a team that are looking at individual class placements for our most impacted and most at-risk students. We're going to continue with that priority scheduling and continuing to monitor them as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Rowley. I'm going to provide a couple updates on the last few slides. And then if there's any questions in general, either Dr. Mumm or Mr. Rowley can come back up and address those. Just a reminder that while we are reviewing the data from this presentation, we are looking, as Mr. Carey asked for additional data, we are looking for day-to-day and week-to-week feedback on how students are doing, and meeting with families, meeting with teachers, and giving some of that feedback to their families to keep them up to date also. Please also know, I know one of the questions that was asked a few times was regarding our quarantine students and being able to engage or be part of Zoom. Know that we're working with our employee groups, trying to provide that opportunity and look to see how quickly we can make that viable so that our students can be engaged. Because we know the key to success is for our students to be engaged as often as possible. Mr. Rowley, can you? Thank you. Please, when we did this survey, probably about a month ago now, and this survey is not a final decision for anybody for next year. This is not a final decision for a family. It is, in an ideal world, and hopefully that's what we get back to soon, what would families choose for their students? And this data, the 86% for the full face-to-face return, the 8% for hybrid, the two numbers that aren't in there, in the red, it's 4.9% for remote, and then less than 1% for private school. So please know that this data is very similar to what we had for the return to school. As we returned to school, we had 84% that selected to come back on site full-time in a hybrid model. And then as we transition to the semester, and then today, beginning of the third trimester, we did have just additional students join So we're at about 86, 87% right now. So the families that are looking forward to full online next year are the same ones probably that have their students in a remote hybrid model, or a hybrid model right now. Mr.
Dr.
Hall?
Layden, just to clarify, this was for the fall of
Yes.
2021, 2022
Yes.
school year, correct?
Yes, if you want to go back quickly, Mr. Raleigh, it says up in the top, the 21-22 school year. In an ideal world, what would families want for their students coming back next fall?
So a comment, or maybe even a critique of these surveys is that, how do we ensure the integrity of these surveys? Or are they just not, is the integrity just not that important? It's just kind of a benchmark?
As far as people being able to fill it out multiple times,
Correct.
multiple responses?
Yeah.
For this survey, we would expect and hope for this purpose, the integrity of people filling it out one time for their response. But when we do know that when we did in July, the official request for what their selection was, then there's obviously names have to go on it because we have to put them in sections. So for this case right now, it's just to get an overview back to us and the anecdotal and the quantifiable data that we could gather.
Sure, okay.
As we look into the fall, as you know, I provide a weekly update, or each board meeting, I provide an update on our recent Kane County Health Department calls. And again, today I did meet with the Kane County Superintendents and the Kane County Health Department to get updates of how we're doing as a county, how we're doing as a state, and what the latest feedback is. Again, as we review the CDC website, as we look at it, the two key mitigating factors are the wearing of the masks and the 6 feet social distancing, and then also the two indicators for a full return, the indicators for a hybrid or a remote, are the cases per 100,000, and then the rates, the 7-day positivity rolling rate. So those are the data that we talk about every Monday with the health department and with our staff to determine our next direction moving forward. So while it's frustrating that is the guidance that we are following and that we are mandated to follow, we do regularly, and I will share this with the board again, we do regularly ask the health department, what are the steps, what are the mitigation factors or the data outside of phase 5 that could allow a district to have a full return? And so we ask about 3 feet. We ask regularly, how about 3 feet with double masking, or masking and 3 feet and testing? So we're regularly asking those questions. And at this point, the Kane County Health Department, it relies on the information from the Illinois Department of Public Health. And so those are the responses in the direction that we receive.
So until the Illinois Department of Public Health filters down to the Kane County Health Department, which filters down to us, until that 6-foot guideline goes away, we don't have the building space to bring back, 86% of our students to a full-time model?
All 86, no, that would not be possible. But as we shared, as we looked at the student academic achievement, what we regularly look at and brainstorm is what additional could we do? Who could we bring back? Who might be pockets of students? So please know that dialogue is always taking place. What would be the offsets if that does happen? We do know that a full return would be problematic in a number of areas, would be successful overall, but we do know that students might have different teachers. We know that they might have shortened schedules. They might lose a class. So we are balancing that as we learn the different data points. But it is and I do want to share this with our board, and we've shared it, and our ed team feels the same way, and our teachers. We want a full return for next fall for those families that want the 86% that filled out the survey that want that. That's what we also want too. So we're working towards those. That means you'll see Dr. Adkins at the next board meeting will present a staffing plan, and that staffing plan is with the anticipation of a full return in the fall. And then as we had to do this year, we will amend and adjust as needed or required by the health department guidelines.
Todd, do you anticipate that, so we still have 4 point something, you said 4 point something % of parents still wanted to be fully remote in the fall, even if we're full face-to-face. Will we have?
4.9 for full remote.
Will we have a remote option in the fall? If we're able to be back full-time face-to-face, will there be a remote option, or will it be sorry, and I'm not saying that's the wrong or right
Right,
decision.
right.
But that we're back in quote-unquote more normal times and we need to come back to school.
That's what we're going to have to monitor, because this year, when the guidance came out, the return to school guidance came out from the State Board of Education. Now, there's the IDPH and the State Board. There's different entity groups that give us direction. The State Board over the summer changed their guidance and then required that each district offer a remote option. And so we don't know if that is going to be the same requirement next year or not, but it is highly likely, if we are starting in something other than a Phase 5 full return, that the ISBE will require that again. That's my guess. Our state superintendent, Carmen Ayala, regularly speaks highly and about equity, student equity, and that piece of forcing students to come back when they may not be ready or it's not safe for their family would probably require us to offer another remote option.
Well, and that equity piece also impacts coming back full-time, right? Like, you know, maybe could you speak more on that? Like, as equity as a barrier to coming back full face-to-face 5 days a week?
Yeah, we're fortunate in the Kaneland community that 86% of our families want to come back full-time. We do know that some surrounding districts, based on different demographics, don't have that option, and due to familial reasons, they can't. But what we want to try to do is investigate the options that we can to ensure that those that want to come back can. If there are barriers that we can try to minimize or eliminate, we will do that.
Is it 86% of families, or is it 86% of the respondents of the survey? Because that's a different data point. The survey says 86%, but I
Yes.
thought that was 86% of the respondents.
I'm sorry, 86% of the respondents. I
So
don't know if it's
not-
the families
We
could
don't
be.
know if that's
Yes.
just, it could very well could be a similar number, but we're
Yes.
not sure. Okay,
Correct.
thanks.
So
Go
if
ahead.
the health department decides to follow the World Health Organization 1 meter, 3 foot rule, is the district, how long would it take the district to pivot back to getting more kids in school?
It's a great question. We've had that dialogue, and what we would have to do is look at how quickly we could do it, and then make sure we check with families that are currently hybrid, get their feedback. Would they want to? Not all will. We've had some feedback that aren't interested in coming back yet. They don't want a full-time return, because some families right now are happy that their students are in a hybrid model that has the 6 feet and nothing less. And so some of those families would opt out to a full remote if forced to come back at this point. But what we could do is, or what we would do is, once that guidance is changed, whether it's through the World Health Organization or the CDC, we would implement a new plan based on keeping the same health and safety protocols without compromising the student schedule too much. And depending on how many changes would have to take place, depending on if their schedules would change, would they lose their teachers, we would have to get that balancing point, have dialogue with families and administration to make sure it's as least compromised as possible for a remainder of a school year.
To me, that seems like the most likely scenario, is that the distances get reduced. And I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what the World Health Organization used to kind of follow the CDC. There were times they didn't. Now they're kind of back together.
Right.
So I guess I would expect there to be more of an actual plan as to what we would do if the 3 feet got changed to, because that seems like the next most likely variation of what's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I think the frustrating piece is the fact that the information or the details haven't been confirmed yet. Because you're right, when they say that, that is likely the next step. But is it at all grade levels? Is it just for younger students? Where would we start to get the greatest student impact with also the most fiscally responsible for our board and our community too? So know that that plan could be put together and assessed and brought back to the board quickly. But there would be huge changes for families, and families would have to understand that, and then based on that impact for them, the election of what they would want to do.
So you'd need time just to talk to all the parents and decide if their kids are going to be at school or remote at that point. I mean, just that data collection point would take a good period of time, I would think.
Well, we'd also have to see exactly what that impact would be, and then based on that, who would then potentially want to move from hybrid back to remote that don't want their student 3 feet. I think a number of families right now, I can't quantify how many, but I'm sure out of those that are back at school in a hybrid model are comfortable because it's 6 feet, and if it were moved to 3, that family may not be comfortable and then conversely would want to leave. So we would have to consider that one and have that dialogue to figure out how many would that be, and then what remote sections would they go to, because if they did move from a hybrid model to a remote, they would end up with different teachers.
So it's not that we don't have a plan in our heads, it's that we can't decide how many people would be in a classroom and how many teachers we need here or there without knowing how many families would go one way or the other.
Can you say that again?
I can't hear because you all keep engaging and we want to speak for you and learn for you. So it's not that we're not thinking about a plan.
Right.
But we can't say, well, we would have this many teachers doing remote and this many teachers in person because we don't know how many parents would choose to be in person or remote.
Correct, but we can't ask parents that survey yet till we know what the parameters would be that they would be weighing in on.
Right. So you
But you're
had
also-
one domino knocks down 10.
You're also, so you're also continuing to plan, though, around these topics, I would assume.
Yes.
Like, how soon could we mobilize if we found out this tomorrow? I mean, maybe not that specific, but you're,
It would be weeks. Excuse me, during the public comment piece, we allowed you to speak for the parameters that we had set. Nobody interrupted you. Nope. Because you met the you met the 3-minute requirement. The board, again, this is a public board meeting, not a board meeting in public. This is the board's meeting to conduct their business. We do have a public comment time. We've allowed that. We are following our guidelines and policies. So we would just ask you, please, to allow the board to concentrate and focus and be respectful as we're focused. We allow you to have your time up and be respectful of your time also.
Then we'd like a town hall next week, yes.
So thank you for your consideration. Mr. Rowley, do you have one? Is there one other slide? Then the timeline, as we talked about, this is our typical timeline to follow a school year. Tonight in February, we just shared the learning survey data. And then at the next board meeting, as I mentioned, Dr. Atkins will come back with our staffing plan to discuss staffing for next year, what it would look like, what's happened with enrollment, any pockets and shifts and change for our students as we move forward. And then, as we talked about, different data points. Then in March, with that just ending the second trimester, we'll be able to get the data points for there, and then also the end of the third quarter, and then into the summer, discuss students, targeted students for intervention for summer school based on the next agenda item we're about to cover.
Anything else on J2?
Thank you for all of your questions.
Thank you for thorough presentation.
Is there a drop dead date that we can set as to what's going to happen in the fall? I know that the state is going to tell us one way or the other, but at some point, parents need to make a plan to say, I want to do remote, they're all going to be at school, something. At some point, I think we need to set a drop dead date of, regardless of what the state says, this is what our plan is going forward so that parents and staff can plan.
I will bring that to you.
Okay.
I will let you know what that date is. Because we need to, yes, I'll bring that to you.
Thank you.
Anything else on J2? We'll move to J3, approval of additional financial resources to address COVID pandemic.
Yes, thank you. I'll ask Dr. Atkins to come up. Thank you for waiting patiently for a couple hours, Dr. Atkins. Look forward to hearing your update based on J2, so thank you.
Thank you. So as we heard from Dr. Mumm and Mr. Rowley, as we're monitoring our students, there is a concern that we have about the learning progression of some of our students. So to help mediate that and mitigate that, the administration is developing a plan to provide after-school tutoring to our students. So some of the conversation that you've had already is about, well, what students and which students. That would be talked about in conjunction with the administration, the RTI staff, the classroom teachers to identify students to bring in for that program. We have two different structures that we're looking at, one for EC5 and one for 612, based on their learning days and what they have. So I want to review some of what we're talking about here and make sure that you have an opportunity to ask any questions. For our elementary students, we'd be looking at a Monday through Friday, 1 hour after-school tutoring program. So that's 3:35 to 4:35. Roughly once a month where the elementary students don't attend on a Wednesday, we would not run the tutoring, but every other day we would. We would provide snacks and transportation. We'd be looking at, with the 1 hour a day, we're looking at 2 teachers per building, so 8 teachers at the contractual rate of $38 an hour, which is just under $15,000. And then for every hour of instruction, we're looking to pay the teachers for a quarter hour of planning. That's where they would go and be able to network with each student's teachers, find out where they're at, what their concerns are, what focus areas they might have for those students, and then develop instruction for them for the tutoring process. At the elementary level, as we heard from Dr. Mumm, we'd be focusing on writing. That's a missing component from the data, so we want to make sure we bolster that with our students and provide that opportunity. At the middle school and high school level, we would be looking at 6 staff per building, 3 math teachers, 3 ELA teachers. We would be looking at the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday from 3 to 5. So that'd be a 2-hour tutoring session, 4 days a week. We're not doing the Wednesdays because that's clearly when students are not in attendance at those levels. Again, snacks and transportation would be provided. We'd be looking at approximately those 12 teachers at the $38 an hour, which is just over $35,000. And then the quarter hour planning for each of those hours of instruction comes out to be just under $9,000. So the administration is seeking your awareness and approval of this program under the $725,000 that the board already approved back in July. This is part of those dollars. So it's not new dollars, but it's just your awareness and approval of that usage for us to be able to start this tutoring program as soon as humanly possible, identify those students, set up the transportation, establish our lesson design for those kids, and then bring them in to service their needs. So we're looking for approval for that.
Dr. Atkins, can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
If I read this correctly, this would not impact teacher load, is that correct?
Correct. This is after school, and this would be additional dollars through the established contractual rate of $38 an hour for instructional activities from our staff.
What access would remote students have?
There would be a remote component of the tutoring program as well for any identified remote students.
And how many students do you think would be ideal in these settings?
Ideal, I wouldn't necessarily be able to speak to that right now. I'd have to defer to Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh. But I do know that we're trying to cast a wide enough net to capture all of our students and make sure that they are not behind.
Is it at all similar to an RTI structure where you're expecting in and outs? Or no, not necessarily?
We haven't determined all of those components yet. I would imagine that if the students come in, kind of like we talked about with that summer school seminar component, where they've come in to meet a certain need, that need's been met, would they need to continue to come? Not necessarily. But again, I think this is an opportunity for us to truly personalize instruction for kids to make sure that they catch up and keep up.
And when we had the discussion, one of the things we wanted to talk about was rather than students coming in and out, just say to study for a test or just to get some makeup homework, it's more designed for, excuse me, periods of time dedicated so that students have 2 weeks or 4 weeks so that they know they're going to be coming, the families can plan. And also there's the bus routes and the contact tracing that would need to be obviously aware of, and to make sure that we know which students are coming, where they're sitting on the different buses, and make sure that we're aware of that too. So it's truly not the after school homework type club. It would be more of a targeted intervention for the students that we first identify, and then from there expand out if needed.
So if you would think more of like an abbreviated RTI cycle, typically an RTI cycle is 6 weeks, so it'd be that abbreviated RTI cycle.
What's the busing cost?
Dr. Fuchs?
Dr. Fuchs?
I've estimated it between 50 and 75,000. I won't be able to know until I know which kids are going to need to be transported, but we're trying to figure that out. So I've used some estimates.
Does that fall under the number that we already approved?
So, no, because it's coming from the transportation fund. But what I will tell you is that in the fall, we didn't have as many sports trips, so there is some extra money right now. I do know that we'll have some spring sports trips, but I believe between what we have left in the fund at this point in the year, that there should be adequate dollars to cover it.
And the money from the summer was for staffing, and so that's why this is about the staff, the teacher side of it, the staffing side of it.
Yeah, but I still need to look at the total cost.
Oh, of course, absolutely.
All right, so this isn't gonna, based on the pluses and minuses, we're projecting this to be about cross neutral on the transportation budget?
I believe so. Additionally, we will be getting some more CARES dollars. I don't have the exact money yet. It hasn't come yet, but we think it's going to be around $500,000. So that's going to help as well. I should know more soon. But the state hasn't said exactly when it's coming.
Any other questions?
That's good.
Thank you, Dr. Egg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Evans.
So there's an action for this. I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approves the additional financial resources to address COVID-19 pandemic, not to exceed $65,000, excluding transportation and snacks.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
And Dr. Waller.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to J4, discussion of Kaneland Harder Middle School course book.
Yep, I'll ask, I think Patrick is getting that set up. If you recall, our process for the handbooks and course books are a 2-board meeting process. So tonight, hopefully soon, Dr. Raleigh, but Mr. Raleigh will provide an update on the recommendations, if there are any, and any changes or updates on language for the course book. And then if there are questions, we can answer those questions for the board. Otherwise, they'll be brought back at the next meeting as intended on consent.
Thank you, Dr. Layden. Briefly outlined in here is the the timeline that we look at for course proposals, changes to courses. This is a little bit different at the middle school. It impacts the middle school a little bit differently than conversations I know that we've had in a similar process through the high school. There's far less elective courses that are offered at the middle school, and it's a pretty tight structure in which offerings, students can take different electives or exploratory classes. But it goes through some conversations between grade level teams and building administration, and then through the educational service department. We share those course books with our collective bargaining unit, with the KEA president, and then we bring them to you to suggest any changes or edits to the course books. This year, there are no new courses that we're recommending to be added to the course book. We have a fairly robust curriculum review process that is scheduled and laid out for the next roughly 8 years. We shared that in the past. However, that was prior to a lot of the changes and a lot of some of the holds that we've had to put on place. I can tell you that we did not have any major curriculum review areas scheduled for this year. It was looking at more towards continuum teaching, aligning our content to proficiency tables, to assessments that are aligned to those proficiency tables. So because we didn't have that, there are no new courses that are coming out of that. In addition to that, in order to add a new course, we would then incur the costs most likely of new staff members and needed FTE to support those. We would need new curriculum materials to support those courses, and that is just in the grand scheme of everything that we've incurred this year. We didn't feel it was most appropriate to necessarily add a course, but with that being said, there were none on the books that were being suggested. We do have 2 edits as we looked through these, some language that we wanted to change to bring to your attention based on some tweaks in the courses. So one course previously had been offered in our course book as video production. We are recommending a change to media production, and that is to convey that this course isn't just strictly media, or excuse me, isn't strictly just video. They use a variety of different media, and we are seeing these things. Our students are creating newscasts, and they're doing a variety of different production, editing, sharing with not only the community within the school, but across the district, and really opening up that enrollment for all of our 7th graders to be able to take that class in their 8th grade year. But just before, the description was a little bit narrow to that video, and truly, as we gain more and more technical experience, it's multimedia that this encompasses. Similarly, the other edit that we were looking to make was our previous offering was entitled Graphic Design 1. We wanted to change that title to Digital Graphics. It does encompass a variety, again, of digital platforms, of editing, creating, and then notably we wanted to remove the indication of the Digital Graphics 1. That can give the indication that it is a high school course, similar to our Spanish 1A, our Spanish 1B, this Algebra 1 that we do offer here at the middle school. This is not high school curriculum, such as those classes have the same curriculum maps as the high school. Digital graphics in concepts aligns to what path those students can take at the high school, but it's not a high school course, so we wanted to remove that indication that it was Digital Graphics 1. This is truly just a digital graphics class for our school, our middle school students here. So those are, in looking at the full course book, we will still have everything that we offered last year. We haven't taken anything off the books. Again, with the way that the middle school schedule works, it's a little bit different than the high school, but those are the 2 edits that we are sharing with you, asking any questions that you may have, any feedback that may have, in order to bring this back next month for final approval.
Any questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Rowley.
All right, we're down to the Superintendent Board Report.
Yep. First thing I would ask if Dr. Mumm, if you could come to the microphone and give us an update on how kindergarten registration went on Saturday.
On Saturday, we welcomed the class of 2034, and we registered just under 200 students, 198, among the 4 elementary schools. The fair was much different. Typically, the fair is held here at Harner, and we have different booths, and the students are able to come and engage. And unfortunately, with some regulations, it was just a registration process at the 4 schools location. Parents signed up through Sign Up Genius and calling the office for a time to come in, processed through the paperwork, and then they were also given donated books from the Lions Club, so a thank you publicly to the Lions Club literacy program, as well as all of the summer engagement games that they can do with their incoming kindergartners throughout the summer that they would have received at the fair. We did also hand out the extended day kindergarten applications. Applications are due by March 19th to the 4 elementary schools, and then we review all of the possible extended day applications and do a lottery process as needed that following week of March 22nd, and then we'll notify parents if they are in half-day or extended day for the school year by the end of March, heading into spring break, and then they make their initial commitment to it by May 1st. So although it was much different than past years, it was still very exciting to see the class of 2034 coming to Kaneland.
How did those numbers compare?
It's very similar. Julianne usually runs it. One of our 4 schools was considerably lower. McDowell did not have as many register this year as they have in past at the fair. But I believe Blackberry was a bit higher. And so it just kind of was a school by school.
I can send out the comparison in the Friday update.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So it was very similar.
Thank you, Dr. Mumm.
Yep.
CAC met last week on Wednesday. We provided an update on the student academic achievement piece. The CAC also requested some information on standards-based grading, that process and how that was going, so we provided that. And also there were a couple parents who were interested to learn a little bit about reassessments and students that are able to reassess tests and what the potential impact at the university level would be. A number of our families, as they have juniors and seniors, they start to look at college success, and so they're looking at what they're doing at high school, and they wanted to know if the practice of reassessments, the practice of allowing students to retake and scaffold back on assignments, what impact that's had in college. So we provided an update on that. The next CAC meeting is April 22nd, and that will be the last meeting of the year. We'll be meeting hopefully back in person on that one based on the number of people that attend that specific meeting. The last thing is I shared the Kane County Health Department update. There are a couple other data points I wanted to share that while the vaccination is moving slower than we would all hope, and that I think that they would also hope, they are at 3.5% of our Kane County residents have now been vaccinated. So they are, while that number is not as high as we would like or as fast as we would like, that is the update that they shared with us. And also talked about maybe the impact of shifting the second round of vaccination for our staff that have selected to. If you recall, our staff back on March 9th, 10th, or February 9th, 10th, and 11th had the first round of the vaccine, scheduled to have it again on March 9th, 10th, and 11th. One of the things we requested, if we could move it to later in the week, that way it could be a Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, because we are hearing that the second shot has greater side effects and an impact of illness. So we're trying to look if we can get that closer to the weekend. Not that we want to ruin people's weekends, but we want to try to have the less impact on the school day that we can. So those are the updates from the superintendent for tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fuchs.
I do. I just have one. The KHS Master Facility Plan Steering Committee will be meeting this week via Zoom on Wednesday night. And this is the first time the steering committee will get to see some initial costs of some potential plans. So we are moving closer. We do hope to bring the design and the information to the board in April. So we're moving forward.
Thank you. Anything from the board? Nope. So topics for future agendas. Any topics for a future agenda?
The social emotional piece was coming back in, when was that?
Yeah, it was April.
Can we move that up a little?
We only have one meeting between now and April, so I'll have to look because there's only the March meeting. But I'll look at the dates.
Anything else? So we'll move on to public comment. This is the second opportunity for public comment. Dr. Atkins, did you have any more? Thank you.
I sent it to your phone.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry.
You know what? That's okay. He's got the list. We'll bring it.
Sorry. Thank you. Okay, so we will start the second opportunity for public comment with the same rules before with Tonya DeVos.
Hi, my name is Tonya DeVos. I live in Elburn, and I have 3 children at Blackberry Creek Elementary. There's been a lot of parents that have talked, and I've agreed with them. And you know, I have one child in preschool and 2 second graders, and I can't wrap my head around how the school is presenting that our children are doing so great on this e-learning hybrid schedule. When you talk about your statistics, you get to 8th grade, you have 13, 14-year-old children. In the state of Illinois, 13, 14, you don't have to be at home with them. So maybe that's where you're getting those failing grades. Parents aren't helping as much at home. We have these little kids who want to be at school, and we're helping. We are doing everything we possibly can because we don't want to see our kids fail. I have a son with ADHD and a daughter with a speech disorder. And when they bring me their iReadies and they're asking me, Mom, what is this? What's the answer? Well, okay, let's sit there, we'll try to go through it, we'll try to find the answer together. But when they get the answer wrong because I didn't give it to them, then we're in tears. So how many of these iReady statistics that you're saying that our kids are on schedule, how many of these parents aren't helping? I have twins, so you have one child, my ADHD child, is actually very good at school, where my daughter with the speech disorder, not so great. They're at the same table. We have the same dining room table. They're across from each other. They're doing the same work. Even if I try to get one to do math while the other is doing English, they're still there next to each other, and you can't tell me that parents, babysitters, grandparents, all these people that you wrote in the email, well, how are we going to get our kids to succeed? You need these people to help you, your neighbors, all this other stuff. You can't tell me that they're not helping with iReady, reflex math. They are, because we don't want to see our children fail. So what do? I have a preschooler that's going to school 4 days a week for a half day. Why can't we do that with our middle school, or elementary school, or middle school? You're keeping your class sizes down, you're still social distancing. It was originally, well, you got all these, you need to clean in between. Well, my kids are coming home with 2 hours worth of work on e-learning days. We're getting that done. So what's sending them to school for 2 hours, 5 days a week, versus having them at school for 2 full days, possibly? It's kind of evening itself out. I will teach art, I will do music, and I will do gym class at my own house. That is what we're doing anyways. I don't have a college degree. I wasn't meant to be a teacher, and I love my children dearly. However, I feel when we are at home and we are doing math and we are doing writing, oh my God, the writing. I feel so bad for my kids. I feel like I am raising children that are going to be, they're just not going to succeed. I'm not going to have doctors. I'm not going to have a lawyer. And it's the schools that are making me feel this way, because my kids want to be there. They want to be there. They don't have a problem wearing a mask. They don't have a problem being 6 feet away from each other. They have adapted to the rules. They don't like doing school at home. They have the TV at home. They have their games at home. They have all their electronics at home. That's what they want to be doing at home. So when I have my son with ADHD trying to do a reflex math, but his 5-year-old brother or his 3-month-old brother is screaming, how is he expected to pay attention to that when he could go watch TV? And he's going to be way happier watching TV. This is why we put them in school. If 2 days of school was actually working, then why didn't any of us go to school 2 days a week?
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that my time?
Yes, thank you. Chris Bateman.
My name's Chris Bateman. I am a resident of Elburn and I have a daughter at Blackberry Creek Elementary School. I also have a son who's in kindergarten who, like some of these parents, we opted to put in private school this year because the thought of doing a hybrid model with him was just overwhelming to try to endure. I agree with almost everything that's been said here today, so I'm not going to reiterate any of that. I'm going to come at this with a little bit different angle for you guys. I just wanted to bring up that we've talked about all of this, the masking, the social distancing, all the different pieces, because it's the safest thing, right? It's the safest thing for everybody. That's what we say, right? Think about this for a second, if you would. So I'm an essential worker, and my wife's an essential worker. I'm the supply chain manager for Northwestern Medicine's second largest hospital. I don't get to go to work every day and do my job because I have to stay home with my daughter because she's not in school every day. So what does that say for the safety of the patients at our hospital? My wife runs a major landscaping firm in the Chicagoland area, and in what has been one of the snowiest winters in history, manages 200 to 300 snowplows that plow the hospital and other locations like schools and nursing homes and businesses. But also like me, because we're having to take turns, she's not home every day, and she can't efficiently do her job to keep those people safe. So now we're looking at thousands of people who we're putting at risk, in addition to the hundreds of patients at my hospital. The last thing that I want to bring up in regards to safety is, by all accounts, my daughter's doing really well, okay? And we're fortunate from that aspect. She's very frustrated, and I'll give you the note that she sent with me to this meeting here in a minute. But I think she's doing pretty good. But I've also seen the multiple news stories about how my child was fine until they were gone. The rising student suicide rate in this country is incredible. And if we think that it's not because of the situations that we're putting them in, because it's the safest thing, is a huge, huge problem. So I ask you guys, what is actually the safest thing? Is it safer to have our children in school 3 feet apart? Or is it safer for them to be at home where the rest of us can't do our jobs to keep other people in the community safe as well? The last thing that I have is around communication. I stood up here and spoke to you guys in October and asked many of the questions that got asked here today. I've spoken to many of you. I've reached out to Dr. Layden. I've reached out to Ms. Sparber. I've talked to Dr. Mum. I've reached out to many people on multiple times asking these same questions, yet to have gotten answers. Talked to many of you, and I thank you for that, but still not getting any answers. I've asked for increased communication on what's going on. We don't get it. Just a minute ago, we said, Mr. Carey said, what's the drop dead date on what we're going to do in the fall? And the response was, I'll let you know. You need to let us know. We're the ones that have to make the decisions. We're the ones that have to do these things. So there was a call for a town hall. I think that's a great idea, but I'd take it a step further. Please have a town hall with the students. Explain some of the things to the students, because I can't anymore. Here's the questions that my daughter wrote. And if anyone wants to see this, this is in her handwriting, an 8-year-old in the 3rd grade, and I can't answer her questions as her parent. Number 1, why do we have to wear masks if we're 6 feet away? That's not what the news says. Number 2, why can we touch each other outside but not inside? Number 3, after recess, they clean the balls, but why don't they clean the playground equipment? And the last thing, and this is from a 3rd grader, why can't we just go back to school except for Wednesdays? Consistency. We got to give these consistency. We went to school Mondays, Thursdays, every other Wednesday. Then we were all hybrid at the blink of an eye. Then we were back Mondays, Thursdays, and every 3rd Wednesday, except for when we changed the schedule because there's a holiday, and now except for when we changed the schedule so someone can get a vaccine. So now, within the next 6 weeks, my daughter's going to school one Wednesday. One Wednesday in the next 6 weeks. I don't know how this is the best thing for the kids. I don't know anymore.
Thank you. Janine?
Hi there.
I'm not trying. You want to give it to me? Janine Zen.
I'm Zelinsky, though. I graduated from Kaneland.
Okay.
Hi there. How is everyone? Deep breath.
Janine.
Right? This has been really stressful, and I think for you guys more so than anyone, besides just parents. And all I can say is I commend everyone's comments. I know she's not here anymore. I'm Janine Zanel-Hojic, born and raised in Elburn. Moved away, moved back. Last time I was at one of these was August 5th, before the kids returned to school. My life has changed. My children's lives have changed. I'm not at work anymore, and I miss it. My kids miss school. I have a kid in pre-K, 2nd grade, IEP student. Struggles socially, emotionally, more than anything. So we have all these goals on that IEP, right? Benchmarks. This should be addressed and figured out February 2021. It's February, right? He's been at school like, I think, maybe 6 days. So there's no social, emotional, there's no there's no observations. And so everything's getting pushed and pushed and pushed. So my question for the board, and something I would like numbers on, in terms of failure rate, those iReady scores, what children are on 504s? Which children in that category are on IEPs? Because I feel like that needs to be addressed. The weakest are just falling further behind. And we can dress it up. We can dress it up, we can pretend like it's not there. Oh, we'll just help them along. Yes, you are so correct. Everyone's correct. They have moms, dads, Grandma Sally, who knows, at home coaching these. I'm doing it for my own son. I'm coaching him through reading where he thinks he's a failure. He hates it. He tries so hard. And when you watch a little boy and his heart just like completely break in two because he can't decipher between certain sounds, and he knows you should be able to, and he's still reading a year behind his grade level with that IEP. That failure rate, he needs to have a teacher. I'm not it. I said that before. I try so hard, but I still have to be a mom. I have to be his mother. I have to put that little boy to bed. And I'm not saying it's just teachers' jobs, right? It's not. We're a community. We all have to work together to educate these children. And it's just so hard to hear so much frustration from so many people out here. And I'm not a good public speaker. I know that. I'm just trying to be real here. We got to do something, and I know, it could be elementary, it could be middle school, it could be high school, but I apologize for speaking out of turn. I very much so do. That's not who I am. But when you watch those numbers up there, we can do better. Kaneland, I graduated from Kaneland. I went on to Ohio State. I know we can do better as an entire, we're a good community. We're a great school district. Our numbers need to be better than that because we don't need to just be 15%, we're doing okay. No, we're better than that. And these little guys, I think the IEP stuff, I'm sorry, I'm all over the place because I'm really shook by it, and I thank you guys so much for all these public comments, and thank you guys so much for all of your questions. I'm shook by it. I just want more answers. I'm a parent. Just more open communication, please. Because we're trying our best on this side too, and I know every single one of you guys, everyone's a parent, a grandma, whatever, but I gotta know. Because the level of worry is real high. I want to see my kids succeed. We all do. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, I don't know.
Brad Tracy.
I introduced myself before, so I don't want to go through that again. And I really wanted to thank everybody tonight for coming here and speak. I wanted to thank, it's on? Testing? Oh, okay. Sorry. I wanted to thank everybody tonight for coming here and speaking. I want to thank the board for listening. I learned a ton tonight. I really did. Made a complex situation, I think, every so more complex. And I guess what I really want to know is if the hands are tied by some other governing body, then who is that governing body, and then who do we need to speak with? Because this is just not working. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Grossinger.
Me again from Maple Park. Sorry, I feel like my comments got cut short before by the applause, and I really appreciate that, guys. But I have just a couple questions, too. Basically, it feels like we're putting out money for tutors, for a Black Lives resolution that just is going to be, we're going to hire a vendor, but we don't know how much that's going to cost yet. And all these other things that I'm hearing, oh, money for this, money for this, money for this. Why not money for like plexiglass? So we can create pods for our students, so that way they can be within the plexiglass, but closer together, and then 6 feet apart, those pods, so our kids can come back to school. I understand that IDPH says 6 feet, but other schools are making it work within Illinois at 3 feet for the students and then 6 feet from their teacher. How is that possible, but we can't do that? I don't understand where creativity has gone missing in these aspects. It was asked today if Governor Pritzker put us at phase 5 tomorrow, how long to get us back in school fully? And the answer was weeks. Why? Why is that weeks? We have districts in this state looking at their staff and their students saying, next week you're coming back 5 days a week. Next week you're coming back every morning 5 days a week. But we don't have anything in place for that here in our district. And again, I understand my son isn't here right now, but I'm telling you he's coming back next year. My husband is a firefighter EMT, okay? He's essential. He's at work every day. He also has to plow snow. He's at work every day. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And you're wanting me to be a teacher on top of being a mother, a chauffeur, a chef, a nurse, and all those other things? I understand helping my child. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help my child. But if I wanted to be a teacher, if I wanted to homeschool, that's what I would have done from the beginning. That's not what I want to do. I pay to live in this community to give these schools. My husband and I bought our first home 3 years ago, and Kaneland School District was one of the top districts. Geneva and Kaneland were the top 2 districts we were choosing to be in. And now I'm finding out that we have zero creativity happening to get our kids back in school during a pandemic. That's so disheartening. So disheartening. Because I moved to live where snowplow doesn't exist, basically, out in Maple Park, 20 minutes from my family, where my husband works 75 hours a week. I'm at home with 3 small children. I did that to be in this community. And I'm gonna end up having to be their teacher? That's not fair to me or to my children, any of them, because that's time away from my babies as well. So I just beg of you to answer our questions more than a copy and paste blanketed statement. Have a town hall, let us ask, I will facilitate it, that if somebody gets rowdy, they're booted. I have zero problem being a bouncer. We raise hands, we ask questions, and you guys answer to our faces. I feel after the year we've all had, we deserve that. I'm not an emotional person, but over the last year, I've cried more than I'd like to admit. I'm sure we all have. But it's time that our children stop crying and return to school and see faces and friends and their teachers. It's time, and you all know it. I know you do as parents. There's ways to work within the guidelines given by our governor to make this work. I know there are, because every other district seems to have done it. Every other one in Illinois is making it work. Kaneland needs to too. Kaneland needs to be the district I chose for my children. I don't want to leave. Please don't force me out.
Jennifer Hagan.
Jennifer Hogan with Sugar Grove. I have to say this has probably been the most frustrating meeting I've been to. I'm sure I speak for a lot of people saying how disappointed we are and the fact that there's no answers Everything we're hearing is I have yet to look into that. I don't know yet. I have to see. And you're right. I am very frustrated, and I am speaking out of turn because, like Tonya said, we need to be heard. It's frustrating that there's no plans to go back to school. These children are failing. They're failing, guys. Don't sugarcoat it. The statistics are skewed. There's not even accurate or concise. How can you take a Kaneland district and compare it to nationals? The numbers are so off. Why don't we say and face this? Yes, our children are struggling with this hybrid schedule. Admit it, it's not working. But instead, what I'm hearing is everybody putting it back on the students. Back on the students and the parents. Shame on you. Shame on you guys. Get the teachers more engaged. That is not right. And how dare you insult our integrity with this survey? 86% of people want to go back, and you insult our integrity? What are we telling you here? I don't get this. I am so confused. And I have a college degree, but it's not in education. We are moms. We are here to support our kids, not teach them. Phase 4, revitalization, says they can go back to school. They're reopen. If you guys can't figure it out, I'm sure we can. We will help. Stop pushing us away. Stop it. You're not helping our children. This is wrong. It's wrong. And I hope you guys start to listen and have a town hall. And I hope next time you have answers. Because this was a joke. I am glad we're here. I'm glad we voiced our opinions, and I thank you for listening. But I am really frustrated and disheartened by the responses we're getting and by Dr. Mum's responses as to why these kids are not going to school. That's all I have to say, and I really hope you guys start to take this into consideration.
Thank you. All right, so we need to elect a secretary pro tem. Do I have any volunteers? Oh, for the closed session?
For closed session.
I'll do it. Okay.
I mean, if that's okay with everybody.
Do we do thumbs up, thumbs down, or do we have to vote for that?
Consensus works.
Consensus, we're good with Teresa? Okay. All right, so tonight we have closed session for Illinois School Code 122C1. Is there a motion to go into closed session for that reason?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Jones.
Aye.
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 Lunchtime's